we had a special meeting for closed session at 6:30, which we recessed and came back into open session, and reportable action.
No reportable actions, Mr. President.
Thank you. So we are adjourning the special meeting and calling to order the regular meeting of the Granada Community Services District Board of Directors for May 17th, 2018. Roll call, please.
Director Warren,
Present.
Director Dye,
Present.
Director Blanchard,
Here.
Director Clark,
Here.
Director Seaton.
Here.
And also here are myself, Chuck Duffy, and Bill Parkin, our counsel, and Delia Comito, our Assistant General Manager.
Okay, general public participation. I think only one of the speaker slips is for that. Pat Tierney. This is for items not on the agenda. So if anybody else wants to speak on an item not on the agenda, I need your slip right away.
Just very quickly, because you have a full agenda. First of all, thank you for your support for Recreation Focus newsletter and a summer recreation guide and schedule. I think it's going to be a great success. We're almost there. We just need insurance, so I encourage you to just do that last step, which is, and I know the staff is working on it, but make sure that we get the insurance so that all these programs can be offered. We built in a fallback to where we can cancel and individually if necessary, but it would be much better if we did what we say we're going to do. Second thing is I would really appreciate your consideration in renewing a version of the county contract for recreation services with the district. As you know, that contract has expired. The county can provide a lot of support for us. Just look at Burnham Strip, Corey Park, everything that the medians, all those things involve the county. And I know it's out of date, and some of the like Appendix A needs to be updated, but they can provide a lot of assistance, and we would drive the need. They're not going to say we need you to do this. We would say, well, county, we want this help. So, for instance, who's going to maintain the facilities if and when we get them on the Burnham Strip and elsewhere? More closely, who's going to be liaisoning with county parks on Quarry Pump Track or other things? The county rightfully has indicated that they would like to have a contract negotiated with the district so that they know where they stand.
For anything in particular, or?
No, this is a general contract, somewhat like the one you had before, where they can provide recreation, park-related services, facilities, maintenance, permitting, CEQA, all those kinds of things. And their rates are really reasonable if you look at them.
We can't discuss this if it's not on the agenda.
No, well, he's just asking you to consider it at some point in time.
So, yeah, I'm just urging you to think that's very important for us to do that as the next step. Thank you.
Thank you.
My understanding was that the county basically sent us a letter saying we're not going to handle this big chunk of the contract anymore.
Yeah, they basically said they weren't staffed up for it, but it may be that, you know, they want to continue coming to PAC meetings and whatnot, so something simple like that rather than, yeah. I've talked with Sandhurst.
So we're not designing the park tonight.
But you are taking feedback.
Yes.
Yes.
I just want to say it's really exciting to get the Burnham, I'm calling it Burnham Park now because I think Burnham Strip, I understand why it was called that, but it seems as if Daniel Burnham played a real role in El Granada, and I don't know, unless people object, I think we should start calling it Burnham Park rather than Burnham Strip. I think it's exciting that we're getting this process started. It's kind of hard to visualize what could go there, so the idea was to get these concept plans just to get something out there for people to see, and then the hope is that tonight we figure out exactly when and how to do a big public meeting and take input. I think before we even give direction for further revisions was my concept, that we take, the next step is to get a lot of public input.
So, you would go to the public with the three concepts that are in
Yes.
here?
Because we don't want, these are not like choose among these three. These are like, here are some ideas, and I think the constraints map is going to be really helpful for people to see what some of the limiting factors are on that property. So we can really start thinking about what makes sense to have there and what does the community want. So we can actually turn this strip from kind of a bunch of weeds into something really wonderful for this community.
Is the scope for the whole $15,000 used up for what you've submitted, or does it include any revisions or anything else? Does that need to be a new separate contract negotiated?
The contract,
Just to get to the concept plans and to do.
So anything we talk about outside of this, we're gonna have to also include discussions on a new contract
right.
for revisions based on input and everything.
But our contract includes 2 presentations, one here tonight, which we're sort of introducing the idea of, let's start really thinking about Burnham Park, and then the second will be at the public meeting, where we really seriously start saying to everybody, now, show up and tell us what you want here.
And one thing that we'll have to discuss as, later in the agenda item is who will do the presentation at the public meeting? Do we want the consultants to do it?
It's in
or-
their contract to do it.
Oh, I thought that was for the advisory committee.
Well, that is one of the options of the next step. It could either, we didn't specify where it would be, and in discussion with staff, the thinking is maybe the board itself wants to take the public input, but that's the whole point of us talking, is we gotta figure out
Right.
what our next step is, because the next step needs to be to take it out to the community and say, this gives you something to think about. Okay, what do you want on this property?
So that process will be discussed at the tail end of this agenda item.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
But we welcome public input tonight, too.
So I have 1, 2, 3,
But let's do the
4,
presentation
5,
first.
6, 7. I have 7 speaker forms here, so that I know how to manage the time after the presentation. If you want to speak on this, you need to have the speaker slip in by the end of the presentation.
And speakers have 3 minutes each.
And because of the number of people here, we're going to do something that I typically try and avoid doing, which is strict time limits, 3 minutes.
And are you going to introduce
So
our
would you like
consultants?
Yeah, I'm not really good at remembering names and faces, but our 2 consultants are over there, and maybe they can introduce themselves. And you do need to speak into the microphone so that people watching this later on television can hear you.
And so
Okay.
the board has previously hired Kikuchi and Kankel as our design consultants for the Burnham Park. So,
And also, anybody speaking, when you're called, you need to come to the microphone there so that people at home can hear you.
No, it's up here. It's Chris.
Well, there's 2 switches here for the front lights and 2 switches there for the main room.
That is a
Matthew,
closet,
that's
yeah,
the
it's
closet.
those up there.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So how do you want
Do you want all of these off?
But we want to, I think we want to see if that's adequate. If it isn't, then we'll use our posters.
Looks fine from here.
But that looks adequate.
Well, you're going to point things out, right?
Yes, I have a,
And explain what all those symbols mean.
yeah.
That's it. There.
Okay, my name is Steve Kikuchi from Kikuchi Kankel Design Group. We're landscape architects in Half Moon Bay. We've been on the coast. Tom Conroy here is an associate. We both are coastal residents. I've lived on the coast for 33 years and have in my office in town for about 28 years. And Tom is also a resident, a longtime resident of Half Moon Bay. So we're very much aware of the coast and its environs, and we care about the coast. And I think that's one of the reasons I think the district hired us. What we have tonight is a series of 3 concept plans, which are more or less brainstorm ideas of different items that can fit within the final design. And it also is an opportunity to look at different ideas that actually could be interchangeable as well. So if there's some ideas from one concept you like, they could possibly be melded into the final design. So don't feel like these are 3 concept plans or final ideas. These are definitely brainstorms.
And one thing I didn't mention before is the assumption is going to be that we will extend the contract and have them do the final plan after all the big community meeting.
So before we do any kind of concept plan, we really have to understand and know the property, the site. That's the most critical part of any design. So this is what we call our opportunities and constraints map. And probably a lot of you are very much aware of a lot of the constraints and existing conditions on this site. So I'll kind of point those out really quickly, but I'll also point out some interesting things that you may not be aware of. The obvious things is the Highway 1 circulation. We've identified circulation with arrows. So this red arrows is major. A lot of these other ones along Obispo and Coronado, Portola, those are called secondary access and circulation. Pedestrian circulation, you probably can't see it, but we've identified pedestrian circulation with little dots. There's the coastal trail, there's your medians that come down, there's, those are about the most defined ones, and then there's also, undefined ones that kind of cut across the park now, and those are evident by worn grass areas. We've identified conflicts too. Like there's a tendency to the little guardrail is over in this area. People cross the highway in these 2 areas here, which is a major conflict. We've also identified conflict or pedestrian crossing areas in this area and potentially in this area. There are also trails here. The trail along Highway 1 stops here, and that's basically the terminus of it, unless we do something to continue that through the park. We have also identified the impacts of noise. These little things here represent noise that comes off Highway 1. And it's very interesting how, when we walk the site, how most of the noise off the highway is actually from the tires on the ground, hitting the pavement. It's not from the car engines, it's not from wind or brakes, but it's from the tires. So there are certain areas where our site is lower than the Highway 1, and when you actually get to that level of your ear, the noise is pretty intense. And it's also very interesting how when you get about halfway across the property, the noise dramatically drops. So we found that to be very, very interesting. It's also interesting that the whole site, I think for a lot of you, you probably generally think of it as flat. And this area in here generally is flat, but there is a sloping grade change across from this area all the way up to here. There's actually probably close to a 20-foot grade change from the lowest point of the property all the way up to this corner here.
20%?
20 feet,
20 feet.
yeah. Because it's actually, when you're, this area here is probably about 6 feet lower than the highway. We've also identified key views here that look out towards the ocean, views here which are blocked by the tree plantings along the mobile home area. And then there's a really nice view up in this area that actually looks down, and you can actually get a view of the entire bay. Yes, we'll jump to pictures.
Wait, go back to the wind, tell them about the wind.
Also, the prevailing wind comes from the northwest. So on a typical day, summer, spring day, there is a gentle breeze, and that is coming actually from this direction.
But on this map, north is pretty much straight up.
Right? No, on this map, north is like this, in this direction. Which maybe a lot of you weren't aware of, that north is actually in that direction.
You can see the arrow, it's on there,
Right,
the north
there's
arrow's
an arrow
on there.
right here.
I thought it was more like that.
And mention the riparian area that's not in the park.
Yes, and the repair, so there also is the drainage swale here and another drainage swale here. This one's pretty minor. The one that comes off in this area could be considered a riparian area. It needs to be classified. There's willow trees growing there, so there very well could be some restrictions as to any kind of development in the area, and there could be a setback related to that.
And at the far end, we're not including that. The riparian area at the,
This whole area here is riparian area, and basically it's off limits.
what does that mean?
A riparian area?
Yes.
Well, a riparian area is an area that, in which vegetation grows. It's supported by natural water, such as a creek or a stream, seasonal creek or stream, and it's a habitat for wildlife. So, as a result of that, we're not allowed to destroy any habitat.
You could have limited trail building within riparian habitats, couldn't you?
You can, it's quite a long process to achieve that. And that's one thing that we may have to pursue in some of these options. The other interesting thing we were talking about the north orientation. This diagram, which is pretty hard to see, shows how the sun actually rises in the summertime in this location here, and it sets over in this location over here. So it's actually making a large round loop all the way from about here to here. So you actually, in the summertime, don't see the sunset over the ocean from this park. In the wintertime, the sun is setting almost directly over here, and it's rising over here, and it takes a much lower angle. So what we'll do next,
Where's the dirt parking, next slide was?
yeah. So also of interest is that this is actually, this line right here is actually the limits of the park. The rest of this area down further below is the state highway right away. So that is technically not within this scope of work. This is a view from the gravel parking lot now. We consider it one of the better views. You can actually see over the horizon and see the ocean. This area is relatively flat. This is from the middle of the road, the whole road,
Standing right here.
right here,
Looking out.
right? Which actually has a nice view as well. This is a view from the farthest northwest corner. And there's a good view there. It is kind of funneled back towards Bald Mountain and across the entire property. You can see how, as you get to this area here, the grade of the property really does sink down, probably about 6 feet lower than the highway.
Well, the last section, what I referred to at the March board meeting as the first edition, that parcel, which was a more recent acquisition by this district, was built up over the years by illegal dumping of dirt there to make sure it wasn't wetlands. So that's why it's some number of feet higher. That's not natural the way you see it.
And here's the view actually from Bissell Road, where actually there is almost an entire view of the Half Moon Bay. The other thing that we had to take into consideration is the surrounding properties adjacent to the park. You know, fortunately, right across the street, there's warehouse. There are apartment buildings 1 block away.
And we also have to watch out for the 6 large manholes.
Yes, yes.
And there will be more. That project is going to be expanded to the northwest sometime in the near future.
Okay.
What project's that?
The underground storage.
Stormwater waste.
Stormwater.
It's not stormwater, other than stormwater that leaks into the sewer system. Sewer systems are designed to keep the water in, not keep water out. So in heavy rains, it leaks in.
And this is looking north, the large eucalyptus grove. Once again, here's the warehouse structures here. And then there are residences in this area, so we want to be aware of the residential impact. And then looking west, southwest, our views are blocked by the existing cypress trees and the hotel. Here's the creek, our drainage channel, however we classify it, with the willow trees. And then here's the other drainage swale, which, as far as we can see, doesn't have any riparian habitat. But we need to make that evaluation. Probably a biologist needs to make that determination. Here's some of your parking, your informal parking. And further down, there's also more informal parking. This actually is not on district property. And then, of course, along Highway 1 is some pretty extensive parking areas there too. So Tom's going to talk about the first concept and explain the design of that, and then we'll get into the next 2 after that.
The next one?
Yes.
Okay. So our concepts go in level of intensity. When we put together these concepts, we wanted to look at things really broadly. These are not, as Steve said and as Warren said, these are not individual options, but they are collections of ideas that we put together around different themes. And this theme is really the lowest intensity theme. Here on the plan, again, you can see the outline of the property right here. Highway 1 is a little washed out here, but here's the highway. And this drab green color is the Caltrans. This is all Caltrans right away. There's the skate ramp right there. And so this concept's pretty simple. Here at the end of Avenue Portola, we have a round sundial feature or gathering place. Some sort of, like, how's that in here? Steve, is it there? I'm sorry, that's the amphitheater. There's a plaza here with potentially a raised stage for community gatherings, farmers market, art shows, very close to the parking area. And then as you move over to the north, there's a potentially small amphitheater for bigger performances, bigger community events. In large enough, with large enough events, these 2 spaces would function together. One thing you'll notice is that the big mass gravel parking lot has been significantly reduced on this concept. Instead of a big mass as it was, we've tried to define this parking and restrict this parking to local uses, access only off of Obispo Road, trying to increase the density of plantings and other barriers to prevent people from pulling off the highway and even camping out here, but trying to make this more of a local access parking lot that services the community, services these potential gathering spaces. Over the drainage channel right here, there'd be a bridge, and then there's a path that winds all the way through the property up to the north. This path would probably be low impact gravel, decomposed granite, something like that. Lower maintenance, lower impact on the site itself, but still accessible for multimodal transportation. There are secondary paths that loop around. These wouldn't be as wide, these would be narrow, but it does offer people different options as to work their way through the site or taking a walk. These paths, as they wind their way through the site, they're going around different masses of native plantings or grasses, different intensities and densities of shrub masses. At the end, at the north end, as you get higher on the site in elevation, as it gets quieter, we have a picnic area. This may be more of a maintained spot with lawn, maybe bocce courts, horseshoe pits, little cutouts you can see here and here and here for picnic tables and benches. Kind of concentrating these more casual uses in areas where there's less potential for traffic impact and less need for access to the downtown area. Go through images here. So the pathways. These are some ideas of what that amphitheater area can look like. I'll go back and show you where that is. That's this central feature right here. These could be really simple forms in the landscape. They may be turf steps or concrete steps with turf backing, but pretty casual use areas. No real defined use. Some ideas for the picnic tables. You've seen recycled lumber type picnic tables before, but maybe something even more rustic. I know going up through the medians, there's some pretty rustic benches and tables, and so we might want to pick up on some of those themes. Protecting some of the picnic areas. Protecting this picnic area, we're kind of carving in some of these picnic areas so that we can get a nice level spot. And one way to do that is to use what are called gabion walls. These are rock cages that are used for retaining the earth. And so we can get, as you get up toward that area, it's pretty slopey. But in order to carve out a nice area, or some nice areas, we can use walls like this that are pretty low impact, pretty low cost, and are really complementary natural materials rather than using big concrete or stucco walls.
So on this site, what likely height would be necessary for those?
I wouldn't think more than 3 feet, 2 or 3 feet. Maybe, I think it depends on how far into that slope we cut, how big of a flat area we want. But I wouldn't think more than what you see here, 3 or 4 feet high at the most. Second one?
Yeah. So a couple of things back on the first one too, was that, I don't recall if Tom mentioned it, but we do have one maintained lawn area right here. So this would actually be a lawn play area that could be used for lawn volleyball or kicking a ball around. It's not a extremely large area, but it is one area that is more of a maintained turf type of area. And also another thing about these walls that are located, the way we have them located on the plan, we think that they can actually act as windbreaks as well. As you sink these picnic areas down into the ground, and you have mounded turf behind it, the wind will actually pass over you and will give you some type of protection from the wind and possibly even from some traffic noise. So our second concept is, I guess you could say it's maybe a little bit more variation and intensity than our first one. On this one, we still have a lawn area. Over here, we've moved all of the major activity away from the existing gravel area over to the northwest side of the creek. And so in other words, there's a kind of another amphitheater viewing plaza in this area. And adjacent to it, we've actually included some what we call passive recreation, which could be a bocce ball court or a horseshoe pit in this location. So there is a little bit more intensity of use here. In this case, we've defined the parking lot a little bit as a larger use area. In all cases, we are showing some type of pathway that runs down along the road here, connects here, and encourages people to cross the street at the signal light rather than cutting across the highway. In this case, we have a playground area over here, and once again, we've maintained this area as what we call low-intensity picnic areas, some things that are not going to generate a lot of noise because there are residences in this proximity here. One thing that we are doing that's kind of interesting is locating a kind of an artistic sundial feature that's also serves as a picnic area there. And we think that doing things like that, sundials, interpretive signs, things like that, this also has interpretive signs. It's going to be something that makes people more aware of the environment, of their environment, of the winds, of nature, the ocean, all of those things. So that's something that we're trying to do here, is pick up on those ideas. Oh, and one other thing that we're doing on this one is we're trying to introduce more mounding. In other words, more sculpting of the earth so that it has landforms that have an artistic value to them. So in other words, there might be mounded terrain that kind of depicts mounds and the feeling of rolling slopes. It kind of blends with the ocean environment. Once again, on this other plaza, we actually have seats. On the amphitheater, we had seats that were inward focused. These are seats that are actually pointing towards the ocean. So these are more outward focused, so people could sit on steps, built-in seating, and look out towards the ocean. And then the sundial can be a number of different things. It could be a large object that makes a visual statement. It could be a sculpture, or it could be something very low-key. And I think for most people, they would have to interpret and understand how the sundial works, how it interacts with nature, the curvature of the sun angle during the season. So it's very, very interesting, and it could be a very interesting feature to have. And then interpretive signage is really important. We think that there could be the opportunity to have signage on the history of the whole El Granada Burnham Strip, the alignments, interesting information about Daniel Burnham. There's also the opportunity to have education-based knowledge of the ocean, which is just across the highway. And there could also be interesting information on the origins of the history of El Granada, the original native people that settled here.
And actually, you missed the basketball half court on the last one, too.
Oh, yes, yes. So on this last one, there is a basketball court here. So we are sticking in a little bit more intensity. It's just a half court.
this third concept really throws a lot of ideas towards amplifying the potential intensity here on the site. And we really didn't limit ourselves to proposing ideas that are just within the property line on this one. The property limits, you can see again, are right here, but we've pushed some of our proposed improvements out into Caltrans land right now. We know that's a lot to ask, but we thought it would be neat to look at this site from a broader perspective. And as we did that, we started looking at the overall site layout, or the overall layout of the whole town, with these long axes of boulevards that cut through town. And we used those, or in those projections, as our organizing design element. And so here, the way that these dashed dotted lines, you can see them, are the streets and the projections of the boulevards. And we focused our community area, our plaza, right at the intersection of Obispo Road and Avenue 14, right here. So potentially all the stage here, it does go right over the existing drainage channel. We are aware that that may be potentially problematic. I think if it's something that the district wants to pursue, then we can look at ways to solve that. But one of the things that we wanted to do was to really expand the limits of Burnham Park into the community. And so extending out from the plaza here on the site, we're showing a different paving type throughout the intersection. And that paving type may bleed into potential uses on the vacant lands next to the post office now, into what may become of the current fire station on the opposite corner. And so we kind of saw this as becoming a real hub of activity in El Granada, and things beginning to radiate out from there. Corresponding to the increased intensity, we've increased the size and scope of the parking lot, formalizing it a bit and showing it extending formally into the Caltrans right-of-way. And probably somewhat controversially, we're showing a potential ingress into that parking lot off of Highway 1 here, in addition to 2 potential signalized crosswalks at the logical extensions of some of these pathways. Hoping that rather than crossing anywhere people feel like now, at least they will have more convenient points to do so, rather than trying to convince them to go all the way down to Obispo Road. We've picked up some of the intensity over here with a larger basketball court, a full court, and a larger lawn area that extends out into the state property. Also potentially a volleyball court or lawn horseshoes and whatnot. We still have our picnic area with the larger lawn, again, maybe horseshoe or cornhole courts over here. There's still mounding being proposed. There is a wall that's going to cut into that slope to provide that wind protection and to provide a little bit of enclosure and privacy for the picnic area. And a larger play structure, a potential play structure, separate tot lot and bigger kids lot, adjacent to the picnic and play lawn out over here. We are also showing the skate park being moved away from where it is now, out closer towards these more active areas of the plaza. I'm sorry, of the park. Also the restaurants, yes. I'm not omitting those intentionally. In addition to all these improvements, we are showing potentially restrooms here that relate to the picnic and play area, as well as here near the parking lot, near the community center. as well.
Also a bike path, right?
And then, right now, it's the current designs of the parallel trail and on this side of Coronado Street. What we're proposing is that we extend that across and all the way down, headed up north, past the Burnham Strip.
Well,
In our experience,
the county will eventually do that, so we should even think about district money for that. Because it's the county's responsibility, and they're only 38 years late in getting it done.
well, we thought it was important to show it as a potential improvement, whether it's part of the district project or not, as a way to increase the circulation and to concentrate some of the pedestrian activity around the site. Some other ideas for the walls that would help cut into the slope up in the picnic areas might be steel. This is a product called Core 10 steel, naturally weathers to this brownish patina. Or these are a little dark, but these are stone slabs, vertical stone slabs that are set at a slight angle and backfilled. So it's kind of, it's a real natural feeling to it. Again, just a couple images of what we can do potentially with these landforms. On the last concept, Steve showed some really smooth rolling hills, but we can sculpt them a little bit more creatively, a little bit more geometrically, to really make more of a design statement than trying to mimic some natural rolling hills. And this image over here on the right, you can see just paths cutting through large mass plantings. I think that's a pretty consistent theme that we have throughout the three concepts, even though the intensity levels may differ on each of them.
Yeah, I think the final one too is more of a design statement. It probably makes more of an urban landscape architectural statement. And these are the kinds of things we want to brainstorm and throw out there for everybody to consider. There may be some aspects of them that you like, but this one is kind of, reaching out beyond the norm.
Can you explain the reason, I think I know, but can you explain the reason for the two serpentine intertwined paths in concept 1 and concept 2?
As opposed to a single path?
Right.
Well, it makes it more interesting. If there's a single path, then you're seeing the same things and experiencing the site in the same way. Your views are always the same, whereas with serpentine paths or looping paths, you can experience the site in different ways. Also, the intensity of the paths, the bigger path may be primary traffic for people on bikes or tricycles, joggers with dogs. The smaller paths might be more casual for people who are just out for a stroll and looking to take it a little bit slower.
And I thought when the committee met with you, you said that one of them would be ADA compliant and the other might not be.
I think our goal would be to make all of the pathways ADA compliant. If we weren't able to, we would have to designate them as not compliant.
Was it intentional or coincidence that on all three plans, you had this existing skate ramp and then one that the skateboard is not on our property, it was left on Caltrans property? And then how would that work in terms of, telling them what to do with their portion of land?
The skate ramp is on Caltrans property right now.
So in terms of all three options would just kind of be whatever Caltrans gonna do with that. We're not gonna incorporate it into any long-term planning for our park.
I think if that was the direction the board wanted to go, we could probably find a way to incorporate it, sure. But that was not That was not the goal of these initial passes.
I think the skate ramp is very important to keep.
You wanna
So-
bring up the lights?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you very much. I think you gave us lots to think about, lots of possibilities, which is the goal of how things could fit together there, so.
Okay, I have some preliminary comments, and then we'll go to, well, actually, I guess I should ask, do the directors have any clarifying questions? Or if what's already been addressed during the presentation?
No, I think that would be appropriate.
I mean, you know, clarifying questions or just kind of other comments in terms of other
Well,
people that.
let's just go with questions now. We'll do the bulk of the director's comments, I guess. Well, let's do the questions first and then come back for comments.
I don't have any questions.
I guess just one of them that I got a lot of is like parking. Is there anything that, you know, it's like, hey, it'd be nice if we don't, you know, could limit parking as much as possible or not even have it, but is that even realistic? I mean, what, you know, if we're gonna do this, there's gonna be people flooding into it. So, you know, is there any thought about what the minimum level parking that we need, you know, regardless of what looks good or whatever else?
Well, and that's kind of what your board's got to think about, because you're going to need to be parking for the park itself, as well as there's parking now for the uses across the street, surfers and whatnot. And if you'll remember, Jonathan raised the issue that if we did away with parking, if you will, that the coastal commission might have an issue with that, because it's an ad hoc parking lot, but it does indeed exist, so.
I will have further comments on that. Any other questions?
I'll just say, they showed us 3 levels of parking, so again, that's something we want to hear from the public about.
Any other questions?
Are we, I believe the Resource Conservation District was going to talk to Caltrans about coordinating efforts, and so I'm wondering if you would participate in that procedure, and have you done this with Caltrans before?
In regards to dealing with,
Well, as Caltrans, we don't know what Caltrans thinks about any of this, and they may be having people draw pictures right now to move the highway inland because the ocean's rising. So before we put a lot of time and thought and perhaps money into participating with Caltrans, we just simply need to know how they feel about it, and they also could be a really important source of funding.
yes, well, eventually we are going to have to review all of our plans through Caltrans, through the county.
Right.
So those are issues that are going to happen at some point, possibly at the next stage. We have a preliminary plan to show them.
Can we turn off the projector?
Yes.
Okay, do we want to do director's comments before or after the public?
I would say before, and then so then they can respond to some of that.
Maybe I should start this one. Regarding the restrooms, one of the constraints that I thought the committee gave the consultants is no buildings on this property. And here's one director that under no conditions whatsoever will I support any buildings. Specifically, what I've said for many years is nothing higher than the crown of the highway as seen by somebody in a car or walking or bicycling down Obispo Road. The height of the highway is the limit for how high I think is reasonable to build anything whatsoever on that property. Now, it seems to me that a number of months ago, this board directed this district staff to send a letter to the SAM board asking for permission to convert the junk equipment room at the Portola pump station to a public restroom. As far as I know, that letter's never been sent.
What are you looking to?
There's a decent-sized room in the Portola pump station on the Obispo Road and Fire Station corner of the pump station building. The pump station, for those of you who don't know, is right next to the fire station, so it's right here. And this room here has equipment that looks like it was salvaged from the Titanic, inhabited by spiders and dust. And it's got double doors to the outside. It can be cleared out and made into a public restroom.
So
And
I'll send an email to.
at least 6 months ago, maybe a year ago, this board directed staff to send a letter to Sam asking if we can do that. I think it'd be a really bad idea. Traffic is a big enough problem. We don't need to have formalized pedestrian crossings here because that's only gonna make the traffic worse. People need to go down to Coronado, which was part of the justification that was used when Coronado was signalized in 1998. They said, oh, people can cross the highway there. I said, that's not gonna happen. Well, who was right on that? As far as parking goes, this is a big deal for many of us who have worked for many years to protect this land as a community park. The land use plan from 1978, and it's embodied in the LCP from 1980, that land is community park, not visitor-serving parking lot. And it's not our responsibility to provide parking for people going to Surfers Beach. That's Half Moon Bay's problem, because Surfers Beach is in the city of Half Moon Bay. You want parking for Surfers Beach, go rag on the city to provide it. But it's not gonna be on our community park.
That's not a reality. People are still gonna park there.
Can we just move this along? I mean, a lot of us have jobs, we have to go places and.
Okay, that's the end of my comments.
Okay.
Barbara?
I don't have any comments. I'm just interested to hear what the public has to say and then figure out how we go about getting more organized public input.
David?
Yeah, I think I know anything specific is, we could work that out later. I think just in terms of some of the general plans, I feel like one of my initial, responses to all three was in terms of creating like a total game changer for, even myself, getting me outside and I walk the coastal trail multiple times a week. I hike Quarry Park a couple times a week. And, I feel like this doesn't really change much in terms of getting lots of people. You have a little bit of the horseshoes. But I feel like, even the space of all three with the trails going through the middle, I feel like if that was more like a track on the outside, where I feel like it'd be a world-class running track, whether it was sand or gravel, and then the inside of that could be used for a soccer game or whatever. It kind of maximizes that space, whereas with the trails shown here, going through the middle, you prevent any type of activity, a game going on or anything, you're obstructing with the people walking through. So I feel like something where a perimeter where you'd see people running around and kind of, whether that with, more like three, but changing that to almost where that circle perimeter is the main kind of, key in which everything kind of flows off of. So, but yeah, three would be the closest to that in terms of maximizing the open space to be used for other needs that come up. So that was one. Other things that came up, people said you're in all three cases, the parking is complete opposite of the people that are going to need it most in terms of the barbecue and other areas. So you're going to have people, parking there and unloading and then walking complete opposite end, and then trekking all the way back, and just the issues that causes. So, people brought up more trash recycling containers, you know, just that whole issue, dealing with that, the flow of that. So, and then I think, yeah, the skate park in terms of, you know, I think it is important in terms of, are we, you know, is that part of this project, or are we just saying that that's, you know, that's on Caltrans, or are we gonna say that, you know, we support that, and if something were to happen, you know, this is gonna be adopted into our project, versus just kind of leaving it out there to dry. Those are some of the comments that I got, so.
Thank you. Jim?
I like the amphitheaters and having some public gathering spots there, so that's to me, it's a plus. But we'll find out what people want to have here.
Matthew?
Oh, I would generally favor less development rather than more. I want to endorse Director Warren's idea about doing what we can to get a restroom. When you have people gathering sometimes for hours, especially if we have a children's play area, a bathroom is a necessity, and we have unused territory inside this building right behind us that it's a sewer pump station. It's, so, you know, it's a logical place for the toilet, and
And we won't have to do much plumbing.
it will be faster, cheaper, and easier to accomplish, I think. And then on the parking area, I guess I also am going to echo Director Warren. We are a community services district. We're not the state of California or even the county. And we are looking at providing what our community can use. So I would like to see I'm not even settled on that there should be parking, but if there is, that there should be a separation between the parking that is used by our community and that utilized by people who go to the beach. And then generally, I think that, yeah, there are a lot of ideas here that we can kick around, and obviously these things can be moved. But the whole idea is to just simply bring more people out there to use this public asset, which is our goal.
Okay.
I plan on putting a toilet on the roof of the pump station directly above the well. We won't need piping.
A toilet with a view.
Like an airliner.
I had a particular order I was gonna call people in, but Tim, if you really wanna go first, I can.
Great, I appreciate it.
Okay. Tim.
My name's Tim Pond. I'm a 30-year resident of the coast. I know I can't look that old possibly. I helped Jim with the Quarry Park, and I was on the Coastside Preservation and Recreation Board at the end in the building of the little park up there in Moss Beach, and I love this idea of fixing this. And I'd like to point out that there is a bathroom there now that's used every day, and that's the riparian habitat. And it's an incumbent on you to immediately address the unsanitary conditions down there and install temporary toilets for the hundreds of people that use that every day. There's defecation and urination every day in those bushes, no matter what you say. And nothing's going to stop that. Opening one across the street is a great idea, and putting big signage up to that effect. The other things I'd like to say is I think you should try to connect that light with a local trail, that where you said there should be a crossing at the street. You should try to connect that with that area there so more people get down there. Because currently you have to crawl up to the road, come across, and come down. And you did have that trail on down there, but I think you could construct a trail through the riparian habitat if you really put your eyes to it. I would like to see bathrooms in this area. I think that if you have a park, there's some kind of building code that says you have to have bathrooms, period. I think within the landscape code, if you have any serving of any potential visitors to an area, you have to have bathrooms, period. You're not going to stop outsiders from using this bathroom, and you're not going to stop outsiders from parking in this general facility. So I suggest you have a large parking lot there. There are thousands of people that come to the coast every day and go to that beach. This is the most used beach in San Mateo County by a mile, and you're not going to stop that. If you take out the parking there, there's going to be parking and mayhem up and down these streets, and it's going to create a hazard. I would suggest going to Caltrans and lowering the speed limit in this area here to 35 miles an hour. It's now at 55, which is, you know, a suicide to get across the road. The other thing I would like to see is some business uses in here which could generate income for you, including but not limited to surfboard rentals, maybe a farmer's market on the weekend. Am I 3 minutes now? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, well, thank you very much. I would just like to say thank you for that. I like your plans. So.
Okay, I guess we'll go with the chair of the advisory committee first, and then something I was told a long time ago when I first became an elected official, you're supposed to call the elected officials in the audience first. So, but we'll let Pat go first, and then we have, I think, 3 MCC members here.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I was just going to throw out some concepts without details. First of all, you have to have a restroom. There's no doubt about it. There's no way to get around it. Coastal Commission won't allow you otherwise. Protection of the resource is one of my highest priorities, I think, and it should be in the plan. We should have ADA accessibility for all the trails. You won't get away with that otherwise.
I can show you a sign up on the Vista Point on 280 that says not ADA accessible.
Well, it's not the right thing to do, Warren. I support a playground. I think that's active recreation. I support traffic calming measures on Obispo. We just cannot let that go and become the next Highway 1. The trails should be multi-activity. That means they allow bicycles, not just walkers. Need to consider parking, an adequate parking for the future community center. And there's no way around that. You don't want to push people up into the neighborhoods. Flooding for some of the circular features. We know what it was like a couple weeks here this year in the winter. How are you going to get rid of the water that's in the lower grade area than is Highway 1, et cetera? On the other hand, parks are the accepted land use for floodplain areas. So this is appropriate that we have floodplains there. It's okay, but we have to consider it. What else do I have here? Turf. How much is going to be turf? I think if you look at the Marina Green in San Francisco as some kind of model, that's almost all turf. And then finally, one way to, and this is more management, to make it a more locals park is to install parking meters that are 2-hour maximum. I think that is going to be the only way you get people to move around and to provide additional opportunities for people. It doesn't have to be an expensive thing, $1 or something, but the fine is $200. So, you know, that it's going to be traffic, restrooms, parking. Those are going to be the 3 issues. I appreciate all the resource protection measures that you're thinking of.
Thank you. Dave Olson. And I've lost track of who's the chair now.
Hi, I'm Dave Olson. I'm chair of the MCC, but I'm speaking as a private citizen. I do live here in El Granada. I've worked hard to get Measure G passed. I talked to a lot of folks in the community. I in favor of restrooms, absolutely, minimum capability, 2 in use at a time. I think that given the budget we have and all the other projects, this should be designed for low maintenance cost. That should be key for everything that goes into this park. Restrooms across the road are a non-starter. That's a busy road. Parents don't want to send their kids across the road.
Obispo?
Yes, yes.
Obispo on a weekend is a really busy road. And you do not want people to have to go across that road to use the restroom. Maybe extra restrooms over there, great, but not the only restrooms. Trail through the riparian area, I think is pretty much a non-starter. Even the trail, the parallel trail is on the edge of the riparian area further south was a real pain. So I would rather go either edge of that. And active recreation as much as possible. I think with the highway there, this is not gonna be a place people just sit there all day, so.
Thank you. Lisa Ketchum.
Lisa Ketchum, Mid-Coast Community Council. As a council member, as issues that the council would probably take up, you comment on this, two things. One would be direct access to the highway. The LCP, the Highway 1 Safety Mobility Study, and Caltrans all have policies to limit direct highway access, and the MCC's been working on this actively in Moss Beach and likely would not want that there. And the other thing is to keep in mind a future alignment for the segment of the parallel trail that will go between Coronado and Capistrano. Basically, the MCC was involved in initiating the concept for the alignment there, and basically the priorities are obviously you want it on the east side, you want it to be fairly direct for people taking the trail, and the other was as much as feasible to keep it away from traffic. And so basically in the segment that's going to be built next year, it's going to be at the outer edge of the right-of-way. So in this case, and also the riparian willows were one of the most expensive parts of that segment to skirt that, because they had to build a retaining wall along the highway, and so not only have the traffic next to the highway, but it's expensive. Here I would envision that, not saying we've agendized this yet, but we probably will, that the alignment would go up to Obispo and skirt the willows along Obispo. This is assuming the county is going to go for the Class 1 separated trail. And then when it reaches your, at some point in the open area of your property, before it starts to swing back up, it would need to cross your property to get to the Caltrans right-of-way and then follow right along just at that outer edge of the right-of-way on up to Capistrano.
So you're saying, I have to get oriented here.
So somewhere between the willows and where the road curves away, it would need to cross your property.
So you're saying it would come up here and go along?
No, Obispo.
Yeah, okay. Like I said, I have to get oriented here. So it would come up here like that, and then
Somewhere between where the willows
cut
end.
back down here.
Well, wherever it works for you. But I mean, basically,
Maybe
you need
along
to
the
get
edge
over to the
there.
right-of-way again.
Yeah.
Before it starts-
You're saying here it would be on
No.
this side of the,
No,
on this side of the.
It's gonna be on it would be
Just
on-
maybe just past the
But
riparian
she's
area.
describing what the county was planning on doing.
The county hasn't planned the alignment yet.
Yeah.
They may just say, sorry, we're not gonna spend any money there, you're in the street. But we will definitely, the MCC would advocate for, maybe not the next segment, but a future alignment that could provide a more pleasant experience for the people using the trail. And so I think you need to consider that somewhere between the willows and up there, it's gonna need, it can fit in with one of your other trails, but need to take these trail users back to the Caltrans right-of-way. Because if you go along the edge, first of all, you're on the edge of the right-of-way, you gotta deal with the willows, you're next to traffic, it's a bummer. Then you get up to the RV park and all, there's that grade change, people are gonna be on the shoulder. I mean, so likely we haven't done it yet, but likely we would recommend a preferred alignment as I described. So that was my comments there. Then as an individual, I just wanted to say that I take great delight driving by there and seeing the kids playing on that half pipe. And I don't understand why it's such a stepchild here. It's noisy anyway, it's a noisy area anyway near the highway, and they're out in the open, so how much trouble could they get up to? They're right out there in the open, and it's a pleasure to see them playing there, and I would just encourage more of that type of use for our young people. And also as far as the habitats, I noticed there was one where one of the drainages was culverted. It's like, so if it's minimal, enhance that. I mean, you can't have too many riparian habitat places. Thanks.
When the Mid-Coast Council agendizes a discussion of that segment, I hope that you would put a lot of time into deciding should it be on the Highway 1 side or on the Obispo Road side, getting past the riparian area.
I think, the sense of the council in the past has been would be Obispo Road would be a better choice.
Okay, Chris Johnson. there you are, hiding back there incognito.
I'm also a member of the MCC, but speaking as a resident of El Granada and a ratepayer in GCSD. Leonard, I'm sorry, but you gotta have restrooms, and they can't be across Obispo. As people have already said, not only is it busy, it's Autobahn there. People come off of Alhambra and they're flying past, they're flying in both directions. If I've got a small child there, I wanna say, Junior, go over to the bathroom, not cross Obispo into some creepy pump house. Okay, I mean, it's your responsibility. You gotta provide bathrooms.
We'll kick out the spiders.
You gotta provide bathrooms in the area where people are gonna be. And more than one seat, too. There needs to be multiple seats. Parking, I'm sorry, you gotta provide parking, too. People are already parking there. It's a de facto parking lot. It's a prescriptive parking lot. People are parking there. They've been parking there for a long time. They're gonna continue to wanna park there. As somebody else said, if you don't have parking there, they're gonna be all over El Granada parking, and then you're gonna have other people complaining about that. You're making a park, you have a responsibility to provide bathrooms and parking. That's my personal feeling on that. Skate ramp, I also feel that's the most used active recreation installation on the entire mid-coast, and the kids that are using it are age 5 to 15, which are the kids that we've got to find something to do with. So got to have that. Basketball court, I love basketball. I spent a lot of years playing on outdoor courts. The thing is that it's not that much fun to play in the wind. You can't take any outside shots. However, if you're gonna have a basketball court, then you need to be a full court. Because when you only have one hoop, then only one game can be played, and kids who are 8 to 10 to 12 feel very uncomfortable trying to get in and use the court with teenagers and older people. So you need to have the possibility of a full court game or 2 half-court games going on at the same time. If you're gonna put that pavement down, maximize it. The plaza intersection, I liked the third design, the idea of having some decorative pavers or something right there at Obispo and Portola. I've seen plans before of kind of a Portola gateway, so this would be a lesser version of that with paver stones in there that kind of highlight that intersection of Portola and Obispo there. Let's see, natural play area. So somebody had mentioned, I think Patrick, a playground. Anybody who's heard me a million times knows, like playgrounds, there's nobody playing on playgrounds that's more than 5 years old. And we have a ton of playgrounds all over the place, and those are the easiest first things that are always built. We gotta look at kids 5 to 15. If we're gonna have a playground type area, Dale over here had some great ideas for natural types of fixtures, big stones for kids to climb on, big tree rings for them stacked in different ways. Make it natural and make it really creative. When people drive by, they're like, oh my gosh, did you see that playground thing in El Granada? That was amazing. You know, a cavern or something. I mean, make it interesting that kids are gonna wanna like, please let me go and play there, because they are gonna wanna play there. I agree with Lisa. The bike path has to go up on Obispo, and then it would be nice if it cut back across. You're always going to have people wanting to cross the highway to Surfers Beach. So instead of having the bike path go along Highway 1, maybe a 3-foot wide gravel path that comes to the edge and comes along and goes down to the stoplight. If you put up some kind of low, and I mean low, like 1 foot, 1 foot fence with maybe a couple split rails there to just make it a little bit harder for people to climb over and cross the highway, and then had a 3-foot wide gravel path that came down to the stoplight there, you might get more people doing it. But having them go back behind the willows where they can't really see, like where, I'm just trusting this is gonna come out back to the water, I think you're gonna lose people there and they're gonna go, no, I'm just gonna cross right here. Let's see if there's anything else. I really appreciate the time.
Wrap it up, please.
And thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Matt Allen.
So, he had to leave, but.
Oh.
Yeah, anyway. My name is Paul Kelch, but Matt Allen had to leave and he texted me what he wanted to say. So, if you don't mind, may I?
Sure,
Sure,
go for
Matt
it.
Allen. But anyway, I'm on the advisory panel, and you know, I'm looking forward to just hearing public input and working on this project in the future. But here I'm speaking as Matt Allen, and his notes are, He likes a third version of the parking lot, big yes. No egress to Highway 1 from the lot. So, that's self-explanatory.
That's actually illegal.
Yeah, I think that we just heard
Caltrans
that.
will not allow it if they find out about it.
Yeah, and personally, I have a lot to learn with a lot of, varying, regulation and stuff. So anyway, pedestrian crosswalks with yellow signal, but no new stoplight. Need parking closer to picnic area so loading and unloading is easier. No amphitheater going down into the ground. No sundial sculptures. Must keep skateboarding feature somewhere in park. And trail system in version 1 or 3, not too busy. No signage for appreciation of history, ecology, etc. So I assume bathrooms would be okay, but no. Yes, bocce ball. Yes, horseshoes. Yes, basketball half court. Combine walls as windbreak / rock climbing feature. Only needs to be 5 feet high. I personally know he rock climbed, so he could, speak to that level. Add bouldering feature for climbers. Yes, barbecue. Trails in version 1 and 3 looked good because not too busy. So anyway, that's what Matt Allen wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before I forget, can we get Dale's photos over to the consultants? Remember Dale's presentation?
I sent some of the things to them already for,
Okay.
I just emailed some stuff. Then maybe, the pictures may be in there. So, we'll
All
talk.
right.
We'll make sure you get that material.
Lenny Schultz.
Dale,
Hi, everybody. My name's Lenny. I live in Granada. And thank you for being here. I'm really happy that we're at this stage of this whole thing. We started about 30 years ago, or 25 years ago, with trying to preserve the space in front of Granada, like Burnham meant for it to be a view corridor. I know, don't sigh, and don't kill me, because I think parks need to be a facility that, serves the mental, spiritual, and physical part of people. And so I like green space. That's why the Marina Green was the prototype for this whole thing when we started. So we've always envisioned a big open green space, and people in the Marina Green, they do everything like play lacrosse, and different, because they have this huge green space, and then they leave and it's just grass. It's beautiful. And fly kites and things like that. So because of that, I'm not a proponent of the crossed walkways. Your design was really beautiful, but I'm thinking about the functionality, because I've liked to ride bicycles and I've liked to walk around and run around trails and be able to tell how far I've come and all that. So that's why we envisioned that, and the parameter trail, and a park course where people could exercise, a little area, and something serving the spiritual part. Don't vomit, people. I'm sorry. Some people just can't handle that. Meditation and yoga and Tai Chi, that sort of thing. It's really a beautiful addition to a community's park, I think, an area where people could meditate. And the sweeping view of the Burnham Strip affords, that real special feeling that you can get, real peaceful, looking out over it and look with the ocean over here. And, you can go up on the property right next to Picasso School where you have the barbecue pits. And that's really a beautiful area. But I would like to just move that, move it over. I'd like to move things all around.
Nothing is fixed in position at this point.
I know that's fixed. We can't move it 1 year and the next year. So I do really appreciate your work, and I want everything. I want the pump track, but not on the Burnham Strip. I want the skate park, a big skate park, in the same vicinity as the pump track, so that those people can really mingle and have fun doing their thing, flying through the air. But right now, if you stand up on the property that we just got, well, we used to call it the Impink property, but we won't call that anymore now that we have it for the GCSD. No more Impink property. Thank you, Mr. Impink, for selling it to us after begging you for many years. Anyway, when you go up there and you look out, the pump track, the skate facility that they have, the pipe, it's the half pipe, I'm sorry. I really like skateboarding,
Can you
and I like motocross and all that stuff.
wrap it up?
So don't think I don't like it, but I think that needs to be moved over. And from the very start, I asked them, please move it over so it's not in the view corridor and it doesn't look like a bunch of gnats when you're looking out over the strip. The skateboarders look like a lot of gnats, and it's, it
From a
would be better-
distance,
Pardon me?
from a distance. Can you wrap it up?
Yeah,
over
so
to-
it would be better if it was moved over towards the riparian area in my mind, and the restrooms also. And I'm gonna really be, the barbecue pits and the bathroom are right in front of my house, so after 30 years of working on this, I get to, I hope I don't have to look at that and smell barbecue every single day, but if I do, that's the way it was supposed to be. I hope not. I hope the bathrooms can be tucked away. Thank you.
One thing Lenny didn't have time to mention is, she's always bugging me about parkours. So we should find out how much community interest there is in that.
Parkour exercise.
Leonard, we gotta keep going here.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure how well I can do the last name here. Sudi Talagani?
Yeah. So mine's really quick. I've lived in El Granada since '89 and I love it here. I love the concept of the park. The bathrooms are a must. And like everybody said, not to beat a dead horse, it can't be across the street, it's gotta be right there. And parking is a must to me, because no matter how much we try to keep it a community thing, we're gonna have a lot of visitors using this facility too, so you have to provide parking for them. And the skate ramp is a definite must. I would love to keep seeing it there. I love seeing the kids skate. The other night, 2 15-year-olds were watching the sunset while they were skating, and I think that's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Fran Pollard.
Hi, Fran Pollard at El Granada, and I too have been working on this for at least 20, 25 years. Goes back on the community plan 40 years ago. We started to protect that, which was the Burnham Strip. Burnham protected it or planned it 100 years ago, so. And I like the idea of a lot of greenery. It looks very pretty on the map, those crisscross and everything, but it seems to break things up, and I'd like to see, a flow of greenery where people can just come and play and lay out on blankets and I think the picnic tables and some barbecues should go all the way down so people can, coming down, there's different places, not all concentrated in one area. And I'd rather see low impact, because basketball, I think we're planning it somewhere on the mediums, but basketball and things with balls, they can be hit out on the highway. And that's part of the problem, I think, with that kind of activity on somewhere like this. It's a narrow strip, so, and we don't want walls. We want this to be a view, like Lenny said, a view corridor. So to be able to sit down, relax, watch the sunset at night, and just walk and play. And I like the idea of the Plan 3 with the trail going around the outside so that people inside the park can enjoy the park. If you have everybody crisscrossing and kids riding bikes, it's kind of blocking views. It's a distraction if you're trying to sit there and enjoy and be peaceful. So I'd rather have the park course or the route along the edge. And I don't know, don't want to see too many things out there. That's it, thank you.
Thank you. And last,
Oh, can I say one more? I forgot, the parking. Yeah, I really don't like parking on the strip. I'd like that all to be cohesive with the green. I think we're hoping, the fire district promised that we would get the other half of the property, and we better hold them to that. And I think that would be a good place for parking, and so the whole Burnham Strip can remain green. So that's my idea. Thank you.
thanks, Fran. As I like to point out, as a math major, the part that we're gonna get is 0.3 acres out of 2.5. That's not half. Last slip I have is Jane McAllister.
Hi, I want to congratulate you on a beautiful designs. I think all the designs are lovely. I can't wait to see this happen. This is exciting. I'm a mom. I have 2 boys, and I was telling them about this. We were showing them pictures, saying, "Hey, there's going to be something there," and they were so excited to think about having somewhere to go play. We live a little bit. We live over near Spangler's Market, so this would be their park where they could go play. You know, that would be just amazing to have a place for kids. And maybe it won't happen while there's still kids here, but maybe for the next generation. I don't know. It sounds like it's taking a long time based on some of these comments.
But it's getting started.
Yes, I'm super excited. It's beautiful. So I like all the comments that have been shared, and I hope that you'll reach out to the community, because I think there's a fair number of us who this is kind of the first we're hearing about it. A long time ago, you sent out that great survey about medians and this, and I'm glad that something's happening. I thought that was kind of a pipe dream, that it would never happen. And I hope that you do consider keeping the skating. The kids love that. It's super fun for them, and I am a more proponent of active recreation for the kids. But of course, I love the idea of having natural play structure for them to play on. That would be more fun than like a typical kind of swing set or whatever. So I'm just excited to see it happen, and I hope that you keep the kids in mind when you do this, because this is a community that is definitely attracting more and more young families. We all want to raise our kids in this great town, and parks are definitely an asset to any community, and beyond just open space, but actual active playgrounds and et cetera, places for them to play. Thank you, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, hopefully the directors don't have any wind-up comments here, because we're running pretty late.
I know, we have a lot more to do, but, I mean, the intention was not, we're delighted to have had all this public input. The intention was just to figure out when we were gonna have a big, well-advertised meeting to get a lot of public input. Doesn't mean we're not happy to have you here, but it wasn't really on our agenda to take this much public input tonight. So I guess that, we do have to figure that out, because I don't think, there wasn't a lot of notice for this, and as I said, the intention always has been to have additional opportunities, so what do people think about scheduling a special meeting?
There's a second presentation coming up, you said?
They will do a second presentation as part of the original contract. We decide when and where and to whom.
And what the topics of that.
Are we asking for new concept plans, or?
What does that presentation include as part of the contract?
Do we want to go to the big public meeting with these concept plans, or ask for?
It wasn't clear. I mean, we didn't know whether, because we don't want people to think these are, choose among these plans. The idea was to just as clearly as people have done, to get people thinking and talking.
Right.
I almost think that rather than spending a lot of money getting these revised further, maybe they make some modifications, I don't know. Think about what ones you really want. And then we do another whole set of public outreach to get more input. And then we really start talking about getting revised plans.
So I think the key questions are, do we try and do the big public meeting on a weeknight, or do we try and do it on a weekend? And I don't have kids. In fact, I'm not sure I even know people with kids. So I don't know when the good times for parents are, but I think the parents are a critically important part of this process. And so, you know, somehow we have to decide.
Well, we have
pretty
a assortment of
quick as to
people here. How many
weeknight
people here think it should be on the weekend? Raise your hand.
I think it's both. I like what the library did when they were doing
Yeah.
theirs. They did outreach leading up to their big meetings where they would go to Strawflower Center and they put up their little boards and just were totally like, hey, nothing's planned yet. We're still taking your ideas. So they did like a lot of little ones leading up to their bigger ones. So some of that answers that in terms of those ones were on weekends. I know they did like their targeted things on Saturday where it was like a little points around town, basically encouraging people to give feedback and show up to the main meetings, which took place during the week. But yeah, I think for sure, I think we're at the point now where before we spend any more money, because I think that's where I see, you know, the valuable dollars is once we decide on, you know, like you see this, the type of play structures and how much they blend in with the environment and all that, that's where we need, you know, once we decide those types of things, reaching out to consultants to give us those specifics of how that would look, the cost on that. But I think before we do that is the community outreach portion of it is.
Well, I was hoping to decide tonight the specifics of the process. I mean, if we don't, you know, it's just gonna waste another month and for I'm not sure how much value.
Chris has his hand up pretty definitively.
You could do both. You could have one on the weekend and one during the week, because you're probably gonna need more than one meeting.
Well, I think the idea is one more community outreach meeting, then revised plans, and then another one.
I guess the question, yeah, I guess what I was hearing, the suggestion was have two, same purpose. In other words, they're not something, you go.
Okay, then we would have to negotiate an additional
Or I
part of
think
the
like
contract.
even a board in front of the post office, you know, things like that, leading up to the meetings
Yeah.
to encourage people that, I think would be beneficial.
Oh,
Chris?
Chris, quick.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so the two birds with one stone thing. I made this comment at the PAC meeting when you were discussing, you know, GCSD doesn't have that much name brand recognition. People don't know they have parks. You need to have a big fair on the Burnham Strip where the dirt parking lot with banners, flags, tents. You could invite vendors who might create these types of playground structures that might create the fence backing, you know, like. You've got to get an on-site there, so when people are there, like, well, now what's going to happen? Where's this? Over there, that could be the basketball court. Here's going to be this. A big fair on that site, like on summer solstice or sometime like that in the next, you know, month or two, so it would be at a timely for this process. But that's a idea that was kicked around as to like how do we get more visibility to the recreation, parks and recreation part of GCSD.
And you're suggesting that as the run-up to the big public meeting or
Yes,
in place
yes,
of?
that this is the public outreach right then and there where you have several tents and I'm talking with flags and banners going, what's going on at Burnham Strip? I'm at the post office. What's going on? I don't know. I'm gonna walk down there and check it out. So you get walk-up traffic, the visual attention, and then you've got stations where people can ask questions. That big easel. Here's the plan. 3 or 4 of those. Here's some of the ideas. Here's the type of surface the basketball court would be. Here's what the walls would be made of. Where it gets this collective energy of an excitement of like, oh, let me touch that, let me feel that. Oh yeah, I love the feel of that. That would be really cool. Where would this go? Oh, over there. And you get that amount of people there. So that's gonna attract people. Anything less than that, we're gonna have the same, you know, 10 or 15 people that are always at these meetings, and the 2,000 other people in the GCSD are gonna be saying, wait, what's this? This is the first I've heard. Next door's gonna be what? They got the concept plan? I never heard about this. You've gotta make a big show of it and have it be a fun fair, you know, where there's little prize giveaways, where there's food, there's, you know, like, it's exciting to be there.
Yeah, no, I think that's.
Yeah, some good ideas there.
So it's summer solstice is the next Thursday of our meeting, the 21st. So falls right on that. But yeah, I think I agree with him. I do kind of see that vision in terms of having it there. Takes it that next level where you could really envision it and really work through some of the things whether there's other meetings after that as well, over at school or whatever.
Well,
I guess the question is, how soon can we do it? Is timing wise, getting this out there to the public, all that. If we do this end of July, is that realistic? Do we need more time for that to get some of this together and
I
plan
can
it?
safely say I've never planned a fair, so I don't know.
What is the,
I think it's a good idea, but.
Sanitary district fair?
what's the thinking on when our summer newsletter is
I don't
going to
think,
be
I don't think we
mailed out?
have to plan that now. I think
Right.
if you're all in agreement that that's a good idea, we can start looking at this kind of stuff and figure out how long it will take to put something like that together and whatnot, so.
But no, I do think, I mean, I know we talked about it before, I do think it kind of tie into some of the summer programs too, because we're having, you know, it's first year we're doing it, that could be the day where we're like, hey, don't, you know, all of our summer programs start next week or whatever. So I think
Each
that,
one of those summer program vendors there.
Yeah, exactly.
Going, this is what we're gonna do.
yeah, so I think in terms of, when does the PAC committee meet again?
Well, I was also gonna suggest, do you wanna talk to have the PAC bring up suggestions for this, so.
Yeah, but
Let's
yeah,
ask-
maybe,
yes.
maybe get their input on in terms of the timing of how to time this as soon as
And
possible.
how to structure
with
some
the-
more outreach.
Right.
Realistically, though, the PAC can meet any time that they and our staff agree on.
Yeah, no.
When is it, June?
Patrick?
Just real quickly, our next PAC meeting is the 8th of June, and we could deal with that, but I think that's a little bit late, because this meeting, this big brouhaha meeting should be in the newsletter, should be on the website, and we can certainly get that into the newsletter right now. So I would encourage you just to say, okay, this is the date, and put it as a strong tentative, and start working towards that and find out if you have roadblocks, serious roadblocks that get in the way from doing that. Again, I think you're gonna need help of consultants because the staff is overworked in many ways. And so to give them another big project, I think is too much. But I support the idea of a big public meeting with consultants helping out.
So when are we gonna do the mailing?
Well, Marty's got it in her hands now, so we were just deciding on stuff tonight, but we were trying to figure out the insurance possibly beforehand, but we can't get it done. We're
Because
ready.
this will be key to go on that, yeah.
And I don't want your board to fall in love with one newsletter.
I agree. I
We
think
might
there's
do
ways.
two newsletters. You know, we spend without, I don't want to say without thought, but $50,000 designing sewer mains and another 30 doing construction management for them. If we have to send out two newsletters for $3,000 or $4,000, it is money well spent to
Yeah,
get
but-
the message out to the people.
Let's not have to send out two really close together.
Why not?
Yeah, why not?
I'd actually send out three close together.
Particularly since this one,
Nobody
everyone's
knows who
worked
we are.
really
We don't
hard.
have brand recognition.
Yeah, the first one's nearly ready to go. It's, you know, there was a lot of work to try to figure out what was gonna go in and what wasn't, to do the layout. It's ready to go. I don't wanna stop it.
Yeah.
And so,
And I don't want to dilute it either. I
Right.
want to have that about parks programs, and if you want to send out another newsletter saying, hey, we're going to talk about the Burnham Strip.
You should
send
at
it.
least mention there will be a public meeting.
Yeah.
We
it
can-
is, it's in
we
there.
can deal
It's
with
in,
that.
it's in the newsletter,
Normally, the board
actually.
sees these things before they're finalized and sent off to the printer.
Except for last time your board took action to leave that up to the communications committee and staff.
And you will have one more, you will
can
see
show
a
you the
copy
minutes.
when it's finally done.
I don't know, I really think that newsletters from the district have to go past the whole board.
Yes, they will.
All
But
right, so-
you can't edit a newsletter with 5 people
Right.
at a public meeting.
Yeah,
I have a suggestion. I think that K&K has heard a lot today. They probably have enough to tweak some designs. We have two things that are rather contradictory. There's a lot of concern about bathrooms, and there's a lot of concern about the view corridor. I think that they could generate figures for us that would show us what it would look like if you're on Obispo Road or looking down Portola with those structures. so that you'd really get a better idea of what the impact's going to be. I mean, you know, I've seen a lot of those kind of constructed views for, you know, new buildings, et cetera, and I'm sure that they can do it. And the other is that it really is essential that we have a meeting on the Strip.
I agree.
Yeah, I definitely like that suggestion.
So that people really know what we're talking about.
Right.
You know, I'm sure that a lot of people in the district don't realize what a constricted strip we have of that property, because there's so much of it is Caltrans.
Can we, I don't know how everybody would feel about this, I'm gonna toss it on the table and see if it gets a stake through the heart. Can we put up a sign that says, future home of Burnham Park?
Well, I think if we did that, we should do that, I agree, but it needs to be, you know, go to this website and find out more information, so that,
Okay.
you know, I don't want to put something out there that implies that some decision's been made, but I think we should have something there that says, interested in what happens to this property, you know, www.granada.ca.gov.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, so I think maybe we're not gonna be able to decide this tonight. I think maybe the Park Subcommittee, which is Leonard and myself, and with staff, and maybe with the help of the PAC, come back with a proposal for how we manage this. We heard a lot of good ideas, and I really like the idea of a meeting on the site. I don't think we're gonna be able to snap our fingers and make it happen overnight.
So when did summer program start, the majority of them? July?
End of June is the first.
End of June, what day is that?
30th, I believe.
The 30th, okay. Because that was gonna be the day I was gonna say that, and maybe that is the only day, if we're gonna rush it, picking that day, in terms of, if we did do that, when we send out our newsletter, I think they both benefit each other in terms of anybody that comes up to our June 30th event, even though we might have more of them, we're gonna be able to get some of those people into the summer programs that are coming in the following week. So I feel like by having it in that first newsletter, even though whatever, just a little marking saying come June 30th, you know, it kind of launches everything together. And I feel like, you know, I mean, we can have more of these, whether on the Strip or at Granada School. But I feel like, is that realistic, June 30th, to say, hey, that's gonna be the day we launch off our summer programs, that's gonna be the day where we take the initial community input?
Well, I agree with Barbara. I think you guys are gonna have to look at it. I don't think we're gonna be able to decide tonight what's realistic and what's not, because we just heard the idea, so.
Yeah.
So I think we've gotta look at it. You gotta work with PAC to figure out what's the best way. I agree with you with the sign. Again, we put up signs,
So,
alerting people to the fact we're rebuilding sewer mains.
Yeah.
We
so
should do
how
one
how
for
much is
Park.
on the website right now for Parks and Rec?
We have draft copy on, but other than
I mean,
that, it's ready to.
So
And
if-
there's a
if-
Burnham Strip piece on it that says that a process is coming and a public input is going to be.
So if we put up a sign now that had our website address on it, there's something for people to see on the
Well, we
website
wouldn't
right
put-
away?
The sign will take longer than putting it up on the website, that's for sure.
But the options are not on the website at this
Yeah,
point.
so you're gonna have to figure out what that's gonna be like, and again, that's something you can collectively make a decision on. But I don't think you're gonna do it tonight.
All right, so.
And so my only concern, I was planning that community involvement, because even prior to this, you know, some of the comments I got were people were saying, hey, why are 2 board members driving all of this? And they were almost saying, oh, no, we're gonna be, but then we're saying, okay, the 2 board members are gonna reconvene and decide.
But we're just
next
deciding.
steps. I'm saying
We're
that.
just
I think
deciding.
I'm saying that, I think now's the
outreach.
appropriate time, though, way to pick a date in terms of if June 30th isn't gonna work, what month and later this year should we be targeting for that first, you know, I feel like we can make it happen June 30th. Does that seem real unrealistic?
I'll be out of town.
I don't know, because, again, I just heard the idea, so I don't know what shape it's gonna look like. I don't know if the PAC will have input on what it's gonna look like, so I don't think we need to set a date now. I think we all agree.
Yeah,
You all
except if
agree.
it's not that date, it doesn't benefit the summer programs angle of it in terms
Well,
of if we.
the summer program that day, what's the first program, Pat, do you know offhand?
30th
Yeah.
of June, and it's Explore Walk Along Deer Creek.
So it's gonna be a small, you know, a few people are gonna gather to take a walk
Yeah.
with a leader. It's not as if it's a big
No,
event
but
that we can piggyback
The
on.
sign and the
July
event
events.
there is gonna be, generate
Yeah.
more interest
Right.
than.
And in the
summer walk.
newsletter, there's a placeholder, I believe, that shows a picture of the Burnham Strip and says you know, get involved. We want to hear your opinions, so.
That's great.
I think I don't think we don't want to rush this because we really want to get make sure the community knows what's happening.
So have we settled enough now that we can move on the agenda here?
I'm comfortable.
Yeah.
What about you guys?
I'm fine.
We'll come back with a proposal.
Yeah, I'm just not sure I understand well enough where exactly this is going.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of.
Well, I don't think anybody does, and that's what we're gonna have to figure out in the next couple of weeks.
Can we refer?
What we want it to look like, what timings it's gonna be, that kind of stuff.
So maybe Pat could
That's
take
what I'm saying, right,
this
so
and-
kind
Can we
of have them take a
refer
look at it.
part of this to the, what's it called, Communications and Outreach or something like that committee? What is your committee called?
Communications.
Does it fit with that committee?
It's close enough. I don't know what you want me to tell you.
It is communications, yeah, sure it does.
All right, so why doesn't that committee discuss it and see what we can come up with? Does that work?
Sure.
Specifically just on the event, just.
On how to do the outreach to get people to the big public meeting.
Okay.
Whatever the outreach may be.
And we also
whether it's
need
on
to
the
talk about-
Burnham Strip or up here or whatever.
Yeah, we also need to talk about whether we do want revisions now, you know, or, you know, what the process is gonna be, because I think some of these suggestions, so I don't know exactly what we should be doing, so.
Well, what I would suggest is that we not ask them to scrap what they have,
No.
but maybe to make some relatively minor adjustments based on the various feedback they heard tonight.
So we'll talk. I think you guys did a great job. Thank you very much.
Okay, can we move on? Thanks, everyone, for.
Thank you.
You don't want to hang around with the sewer budget?
Two sewer budgets, not just
Sewer
one.
budgets, yeah.
Such a deal.
Rolling? Item 2, consideration of Sewer Authority Mid-Coast Side draft fiscal year 2018-19 JPA general and contract collections budgets. Chuck?
And we've got Beverly Marshall here. I'm sorry you had to sit through that, but,
I wasn't planning on a presentation, I'm just here in case you have questions.
okay. So, does anyone have any questions? We reviewed this budget, I won't say in great detail, but at our April meeting, and we discussed it like there, so do any of you have any questions for Beverly?
No.
Okay.
I don't have any questions. I find the process a little frustrating because there are issues that get raised, and it doesn't seem as if, this organization is, you know, part of the decision-making process and yet not. So, but I understand the issues, and if, it seems as if there's a level of, this is an okay budget for Sam for the year ahead, and that it would be appropriate for us to approve it.
It would be,
Appropriate for us to approve it. I mean,
The one concern
I want to
have-
ask, I'm sorry, our Sam reps to speak to that.
Well, the one concern I have, and I'm far from alone on this, is even ignoring the capital maintenance increase to handle things that have basically been ignored for too many years, ignoring that substantial increase in cost, the rest of the budget is still going up year over year at some significant factor of the inflation rate, and that can't continue.
well, we discussed that at our last, no, you actually weren't here at the last meeting, were you?
I was literally on the other side of the earth.
So yes, and we've discussed that at length, we discussed that at the managers' meetings and whatnot, but as Barbara points out, and as I pointed out at our last meeting, you know, the fact that this board has to approve it gives us a little bit of the illusion that we have control over it. And we don't, as I often say to Beverly, you know, it's Sam's budget, not our collective budget, so.
Relative to the cost going up year over year, I have a question. In the treatment division, we have in the 2012-2013, that was handled by, the same plant was handled by 4.6 regular positions.
What page are you holding in your hand?
42 on
Beverly, this is
the
a
corner.
question.
And now we're looking at 8.75, so we're just nudging twice as many. And it's the same plant, doing the same thing, and is there nearly twice as much work?
No, the various iterations of the budget through the various managers that have been at SAM, interims, permanent managers, not so permanent managers, everyone has worked with the member manager group trying to find the right combination of allocation between the collection system and the JPA side, as we refer to it, what's in the JPA agreement versus what's in the contract services. And through various iterations, the staffing had remained relatively constant, but where they had charged to was moving around. And so part of what you're seeing is input that I received from at least two of the managers that the collection system, in determining whether or not SAM continues to provide the collection services through contracts or not, that it should be very clear and definitive, the line between what SAM, the JPA, has to have in order to operate and what the contract service is, and that they shouldn't be shared. Because when they're shared, it's not really easy to see the impact on either set of services if one goes away. And so what I've done with this year's budget is everything that's in the, what I would call the general budget for the JPA is contained and necessary for the JPA, regardless of what happens to the contract services. Contract services stand alone, operate alone. If it goes away, the positions related to it go away, and the JPA can still function. So that's the way the budget is. So what you're seeing is not necessarily a doubling of staffing. It's where truly does this work belong? What does it support? What does it go toward? Because before, the concept was the contract services, collection services, and the JPA were sort of a shared service, all for one and one for all. And so it was okay that the JPA services borrowed from the collections folks and vice versa in order to support the services. And the direction that I've been receiving, especially this past year, is that it really needs to be segregated out so that an apples to apples comparison can be made of the cost of SAM's JPA services versus comparable agencies, SAM's collection services versus comparable agencies.
I also understand that in accounting, there's more, one and a half additional positions now? Is that?
No, it was moved from half-time to full-time. It was just, one person was increased from half-time to full-time. The additional person was in the treatment side. It was an additional operator in training.
But the staffing did increase from, what's it now, 18?
Right now, it is
No,
17.
what will it be? What is
Oh, with the budget, it would be
contemplate?
18.
And so it increased from, I think, 14 to 18. There's 4 collections people, and this is a question, 1 mechanic?
Yes,
4
there
collections?
are 4 collections and 1 maintenance mechanic that supports the contract services.
Right. Okay.
So 5 completely distinct positions that are not borrowed
So
from treatment.
Does that, is that a full-time amount of work?
Yes, it is. As long as we are providing contract services to all 3 agencies, which right now has been the direction that we've been given, is that we would be continuing at least for the next 3 years providing for Half Moon Bay and at least for the next year, Montero and Granada. So we would need a full-time maintenance person. And the majority of that is supporting Montera, because they have a
So
lot
if you
of
look
limitations.
at page 62, the numbers, the actually budgets for collections, the staffing has gone down.
And that was because they were sharing and
Right.
allocating costs. And when you just look at standalone, 5 is truly what it takes to run the collection services.
But on page 62, wages go from 390,000 to 446,000.
Part of it is the addition of the positions. We added an operator in training this year.
But
So that's a difference in the budget.
Which section am I in? No, this is in collection.
Oh, and collection, it's
Yeah.
just, it's always been 5 people, but we've shared those resources between the JPA side of services and the contract services. So if,
No, his question was, why did the wages go up?
Well, if it's fully loaded now in the JPA side, shouldn't there be a reduction from the removal of the subsidy between contract and operations and treatment?
JPA was subsidizing contract services, not the other way around.
But I thought we just heard that JPA side went up because of that
The
stricter
costs,
accounting.
the costs for certain things was being borne by the JPA that really were 100% related to the collection services. So,
Well, maybe I'm not hearing it right, but what I thought I'm hearing here is that there was this blurry thing in the middle, and so it's been split into a clean line, but both sides have gone up.
that is correct, and part of that is because the JPA side needed additional staffing no matter what. So there were 2 things happening. One is completely segregate the 2 different cylinders of services so that they're not merged together, so you can do the apples to apples comparison from other agencies to SAM. The second was the minimum staffing discussion that was done for the JPA side, which was specifically looking at what SAM services provide, because we'd already looked at the collection services. And what was identified was that in order to support the JPA on its own, regardless of whether or not we're doing contract services, we would need to do and have additional staffing for the JPA. So not only did we segregate out some of the shared costs so that people could do that standalone comparison, we also increased staffing at the JPA level. So it was a combination of both of those.
And I had asked a question earlier about collections. So the current contract that you've circulated with Half Moon Bay is different than Montera's and Granada's, but roughly your costs this year for collections are $930,000.
Approximately, yes.
Right, plus or minus. And that's what's gonna be your revenue for this year. Year 2, you show revenue of something like $585,000, but your fixed costs remain the same. How does that get accounted?
That's part of the discussion that we're having at the SAM level as to, but we also expect some, how do I put this plain? Some of our workforce is aging and we do expect some attrition.
Well, but that's $350,000 worth of attrition?
No, it's not 350,000, but there's some other expenses that we believe we can economize when the cost of the, and this is assuming Half Moon Bay does reduce to half. That they go from all lines every year to half the lines each year. If Montera and Granada continue at everything every year, some of those costs have to stay anyway, because, for example, half the mechanic would not go away because they've already reduced the amount of time that they have devoted to the lift stations. So that cost remains. So clearly that's not going to be a 50% reduction in the associated cost to the lift stations. From a line cleaning, it depends on where Half Moon Bay ends up on theirs, as well as the 2 other agencies, but we believe that through attrition, we would be able to address that concern. It is somewhat difficult when I don't have half of the work detailed out yet, so I'm assuming everything else stays the same because that's the direction that I was given.
But not sure that answered the question. So you circulated the contract that had year 1, 2, and 3 for all 3 districts, Half Moon Bay, ourselves, and Montera. And that's where I got the $585,000 number. So in year 2, will you still have 4 people and a mechanic?
I did not circulate a contract that was for everyone. What I circulated was the RFP. It was the proposal that we submitted to the city, and the city left out specific services that we are already providing to the 2 member agencies that were not addressed in the Half Moon Bay request for proposals. So what I simply did was, I said this is what I submitted to Half Moon Bay based on their request for proposals. There were clearly different services identified and assumed for Montera and Granada in their request for proposals. And I clarified, this is going based on what was in the RFP, not the current service level. The budget I sent out to Granada and Montera specifically outlined based on current services what the costs are. Because I've been given no direction that Granada and Montera would be changing their services from what we're providing today. So the proposal was, they asked for, this is what Half Moon Bay wants. Oh, and by the way, you could also, as additionals, you could show what you would do for these types of services for Granada and Montera. But it was not including the lift stations, it was not including the support services that we provide, it was not including the additional work that we do, like for Granada where we do the inspections, things like that. It didn't have any of that. It didn't have the water costs in there, it didn't have a lot of the stuff that's already in the budget.
You had Half Moon Bay's collection contract on the agenda last month for approval. Let's just assume for argument's sake it did indeed get approved. They're gonna pay $330,000 this year, and then next year they'll pay $180,000. Okay, where does that $150,000 get?
They may or may not, because we still have to have that discussion. We have not had it.
Let's assume they do.
If they assume they do, then we would be looking at our staffing levels and whether or not we would need to have staffing reductions or through attrition, be able to absorb the loss of that portion of the line work. And it would clearly be just those 4 people that are affected, because the maintenance mechanic is almost all up in Montera. So that, no matter what happens, unless they want to reduce those services, that cost is going to be constant. So really it's, what does Half Moon Bay do in year 2? And the proposal had an explanation for both. If you keep it at every line, every year, this is what it is. If you reduce it, this is what it is.
Okay.
But I didn't have the applicable information for Montera and Granada, because all I was given was everything remains the same for next year. So I wasn't looking 3 years out.
So, and I don't think I've circulated that proposal or whatever you want to call it. It's all circulated to your board.
So do you have, I guess I should have done this, but I didn't have time. Do you have a comparison of current fiscal year to next fiscal year of the sum of our 2 costs to SAM for each of the 2 years? What's the year-over-year increase in the total amount we'll pay to SAM next year versus the total amount we'll pay to SAM this year?
It gets twisted up a little bit because our share of flows has dropped from 29% to 24%. So even though SAM's costs are increasing, I think you asked me this question, 14% year over year, our share is remaining relatively flat because we're now paying 24% instead of 29%.
That's this year, and basically that's a one-time anomaly.
Right, and our collections costs are increasing something like $30,000 year over year. So, but everyone's is.
So our actual costs next year will be similar to our actual costs this year?
For SAM?
For everything that we pay to SAM?
I don't know that, because the collections is up in the air, because not sure I understand if we all reduce services where the money goes.
So you're considering reducing services that GCSD requests?
Well, that was the proposal Beverly circulated, showed Half Moon Bay reducing services, us reduce, I haven't seen Montera's obviously, so I don't know.
let me clarify, I wasn't proposing to reduce services. The city's request for proposal said, make this assumption,
Right.
that all three agencies reduce their services. Sam has not said that the agencies should reduce their services.
Yeah, absolutely. If the
It was
agencies
my
reduce
response.
their services, it'll come from us, not from Sam.
So I
Right.
misunderstood something. So you're not proposing that we reduce our services?
Well, that was year two. I'm not proposing anything at this point in time. We're doing status quo this year, if that's what you're asking.
Okay.
Yeah. Everyone, Half Moon Bay, ourselves, and Montera. So the question is, what happens in year two?
Half Moon Bay is not keeping current services. They
Well,
have,
I mean,
they have
close enough.
reduced their services.
Right, yeah.
They have a very, for example, the request for proposal shows that they estimate hotspots to be done about 9,000. We do about 50,000 right now. So once the
You're
contract.
talking, linear feet?
Yes. So clearly, there's going to be a discussion about the lines that we've been previously doing on a much more frequent basis and significantly reducing that. So that's a major change. And we haven't even had that discussion yet. We haven't had that discussion with Granada or Montera either, if they want to reevaluate those lines, increasing frequencies or decreasing frequencies. So the assumption for Half Moon Bay is they'd already made that decision. They already identified that they could do that they could reduce the frequency of those hotspot cleanings and reduce the linear feet cleaning. So that they've already reduced that, and they've significantly reduced by 80% the amount of time they want serviced on their 3 lift stations. They're going from seeing them every day to once a week. So that's a significant difference in
Yeah, but the
time.
big drop in services is gonna happen
Year two.
theoretically year two.
But it's
I mean, they're in the
still,
ballpark now, but yeah,
Yeah,
they reduced
so-
it, but yes.
yeah, and it's not necessarily that it's going to happen, it's part of the process this year of reevaluating the lines, identifying lines that, because it may be not exactly half, it may be 2/3, and because part of it needs to be done every year. So part of that is, the city took on that they would be doing CCTVing for the system, and part of that, I would imagine, is going to be driven by the results of that CCTV work, which Sam won't be doing, they'll be doing that separately.
So, some significant part of the collection system budget has to be fixed costs. And my concern is if Half Moon Bay's share of the total budget goes down, doesn't that increase how much of the fixed costs the other agencies are gonna end up picking up?
No, because most of the fixed costs that are associated with it is staff costs, I mean, for the most part. The linear feet, your gas, or your fuel for your vehicle, your water use, all of that is driven by linear feet claimed. So what really it is the amount of staff that are on call 24/7 to be able to respond and performing the tasks. If Half Moon Bay reduces by half the linear feet, the cost doesn't go down by half because they still have to support having the responders to that. So it's not a half goes away. It is a reduction because we're not spending all of the fuel, water, and other costs that are associated with cleaning the lines, but some of that staff cost remains just to have somebody on standby. So that is built into their costs. So their per linear foot goes up because of some of those fixed costs. So if they play with the linear feet that they want cleaned, it goes up or down a little bit, but it's not completely a cut in half because, you know, you still have to have enough people to respond.
Right.
And they will pay for that whether or not their linear feet stays the same or not.
So on page 58, you have the numbers for the 3 agencies for collection services, and you have the 17, 18, 18, 19, and then I guess this adopted is wrong. There, it should be dollar change rather than adopted in the second column from the right. So it looks like Half Moon Bay is going up, but this is based on your proposal.
No, it's dollar change, and then the last column is percent.
I know. I'm saying that the from 2017-18 to 2018-19, Half Moon Bay is still going up.
Yes.
So that will go down for the next year, or this is based on your proposal, not the final resolution of your agreement with Half Moon Bay?
This is based on the proposal and the discussion that we've had based on a 3-year contract, what they know they want for year 1. Year 2 is still to be determined.
And that's when
they-
it's gonna go down, because it's not.
Potentially.
Okay, got it.
Because we don't do a 2-year budget, we do a 1 year at a time, at least currently, that's what we do. But in the proposal, I had to give them both. I had to give them years 2 and 3 if they reduced services, and what would it be if they kept the same. So in the proposal, it shows, if you reduce, this is what your cost will be in year 2 and year 3. If you don't reduce, this is what your cost will do. It will go up by an incremental amount based on this year.
And this is based on 5 staff, and if it goes down significantly, then you would lay off 1 staff person.
Not necessarily lay off, but we would address the issue based on what the needs are for SAM as well as the needs are for the
So you
collection
might-
services.
Since we have this line now, so you might actually shift them across the line?
I'm not saying I would shift, I'm saying I don't know what, I mean, people retire and things, so I'm not saying that somebody would be laid off. I'm saying we'd have to analyze the staff at that time.
They
But
might go across the line.
there would be a reduction that the SAM board would have to take into consideration. And I wouldn't even try to anticipate that conversation until I could see what that was going to be.
Thank you.
What's the increase for professional services, specialized services not going to be performed by staff from 10,000 to 200,000?
Much of that is outside maintenance work that staff is not qualified to do. So for example, we don't have an electrician on staff. So if we're going to be doing maintenance that we have previously not done, then we have to contract that out. And there was, when we did the staffing analysis, a laundry list of stuff that we had stopped doing or had never done because we didn't have the resources, whether staffing or not. And we can't keep doing that, and so that's part of the recommendation, is that those services get put back or be introduced, and then trying to identify the better way to do it, which is, do we hire someone or do we just contract the service out? But in either case, the work has to be done. One of the things is hiring a utility worker, which if we are able to do so, we would terminate using a landscape service and a janitorial service, because that person could do that, and along with the other duties that they would be doing. So that's some of that balance. But there's some of the work that is very technical in nature, and you have to have qualified people doing it. And we don't have enough of that work to really justify a full-time or even part-time position, and it would be difficult to hire. But we do need to increase our services with various entities to get it done, whether we continue to use the same vendor or hopefully go out for a contract and maybe get someone else. So, but we need to at least plan for making sure that maintenance gets done.
Okay, any other questions?
Well, I'm still trying to understand about the treatment division. The people actually run the same plant that they've been running for years. It sounded like you said that for the last 5 or 6 years, the numbers that it showed for regular positions at it running the plant were actually inaccurate on purpose, because those people were positioned over in other divisions, and part of that time was allocated to those other divisions, when in fact they were actually working on running the plant. Is that what's happened?
Well, for example, 3 years ago, not one of the budgets I did, but my predecessor had done, was that sometimes we would borrow, let's say we were, one of our maintenance staff was out on leave, vacation, whatever the case may be. And we have our regular commitment for the lift stations, the contract services. And let's say something happened and that person had to focus on one particular issue. We might send one of our operators out to go do the lift stations to make sure that those daily checks happen. Well, that person isn't actually working for SAM, the JPA. They're doing work for the contract services. So what they had done was estimated the amount of time that we might borrow from treatment staff, and they allocated that to the contract collection services. But that was part of the difficulty in doing that apples to apples comparison that we've been struggling with for the last 3 years is really what is truly collection system, and if it goes away, what would really go away, what staff would really be affected, and then what actually is treatment. And so when we look at that, we have to say, these are people that we need in the treatment. Whether or not they occasionally go help someone is irrelevant. We still need those number of man hours in treatment. So what this reflects is the number of needed hours in treatment. One of the other things is there was a position that was recently created a few years ago, and that was the engineering contracts manager. And my understanding for the creation of that was that we were relying heavily on project management from the engineering firm. And so it wasn't really necessarily engineering that was done. It wasn't something that somebody with a PE need to do. It was someone on SAM making sure that the contractors were doing what they were supposed to do, the engineering firms and the construction. That was then brought and created into a position to reduce the amount of money that we would spend asking a licensed PE to do project management. When I came, it had just been implemented, and to me, it seemed relevant that that should be charged to the infrastructure costs. I mean, if they're supporting construction projects and infrastructure projects, then that's where they should be charged, because where I come from in cities and other places where you have different funding sources, you have to allocate based on time and where the revenue is coming from. Apparently that created confusion, and so the request was get all staffing costs out of the construction infrastructure budget. So that person was put into treatment, because that's really where he spends a lot of his time, is supporting projects, little baby P projects in the treatment plant and the pump stations, which is, all the pump stations are also under treatment. They don't have their own segregated budgets. So anything that happens on SAM facilities generally gets charged to treatment.
So these changes have to do with how much borrowing of a particular staff person is estimated will happen in the following year?
That's what it used to be. So, and that was just an allocation method, and you know, I would say it was a wild guess each year as to what might happen, or looking back at last year and saying what had happened and would that happen again next year. And I think that was part of the frustration of it was constantly doing this. So the JPA budget would go up and the contract services would go down, and then vice versa based on that. So the request was, these need to be clear that what is in the JPA is related to the JPA, whether or not we do contract services. So this is what SAM needs to actually run, no matter what. And this is what the contract services need to run, no matter what. And so that's what you're seeing. And so we stopped this allocation method.
So from 2015, 2016, when it took 4.275 regular positions to run that plant, next year it's going to take literally double, 8.75 full-time positions to run that same plant. And that's because of juggling the numbers because people went and did other things?
It's to show the true cost of SAM's operations. Because as I said before, the view of it was collection services and the JPA services were mutually shared across. We were sharing staff costs. So if somebody was sick, you know, somebody would say, oh, today I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna support the contract services, or today I'm gonna get borrowed, Sam had a spill, so we're gonna borrow the collections people and send them over to the treatment side and have them support the JPA. And it was just all blended together. And it was allocated based on an estimate of how much of that occurs. The member managers requested that we not do that, and because it's hard to do an apples to apples comparison if you've got that cross sharing, if you're using that mutual aid approach. The cost of services should be, this was not from me, but from the member managers, that the cost of services should be in segregated form so that it's very clear if decisions are made about programs to eliminate or add, support services to add or increase or delete, what that cost is. What's the impact on staff and what's the cost? So if you look in other budgets, so for example, the infrastructure budget, you would see a commensurate reduction in, there's no staff costs now associated with that. That half-time person is sitting, their costs are sitting in treatment because that's really what he's supporting. He's
So
supporting the project.
this changed approach has been implemented across the board.
Yes, yeah, so if you look at the entire budget, it didn't, in the entire JPA budget, it didn't double.
No, oh, no. But, so this new approach provides us with actual costs by division or by
Function.
function.
Yeah,
Yes.
and keep in mind, treatment isn't just the plant, it's the entire IPS. It's the 3 pump stations, the pipeline, and the treatment plant. It is that's what it is entailed completely. That's what we call treatment. It's not just the plant.
Pipelines are not collections?
Our lines, the IPS section is actually permitted under our treatment permit. So that's why, I guess that's why it has always been under treatment and it hasn't been segregated out into its own budget. It was just, if you look at the JPA agreement, it talks about the operations and maintenance. And it doesn't talk about the operations and maintenance of the plant. It talks about the operations and maintenance of SAM facilities. And so that's really what we call treatment. The only thing that's separated out is what we used to call the lab work or the environmental compliance, because it's supposed to be separated out because it has specific functions like pre-treatment and prevention programs that are very specifically separated from the actual treatment measurement. So we've separated that out to be able to demonstrate what we spend on that particular function separate from the treatment requirements. And then administration, which is sort of just general support. Support for the board, accounting, finance, IT, stuff like that. And then those are the only functions. And then, of course, collection system is segregated out because it is a contract service.
Okay.
So here's where I'm getting stuck. I'm looking at both page 42, which is the JPA side, and page 62, which is the collections system contract maintenance. And so if I look at the increase in wages, that's 41%. And I did this on the wrong line. I computed the miscellaneous benefits when I meant to do the total. It's in a different place in this budget. And that's 44%. And then the contract collection system, the wages without an increase in staff, as best as I can understand from what's been said here, that's up 14%, and the personnel subtotal there is up 12%, and that's with a 3% COLA.
It also is an increase in the step increases because we do have 2 of the staff that are low enough, they haven't been there long enough that they have not worked their way up to the top step. So there's a 3% increase in each step. And there's also an assumption, well, not an assumption, there was a change because the staffing is what we call flexibly staffed, whether you're a 1, 2, or 3, depends on your certification. And we did have one of the employees get certified at the higher level, so he would have basically promoted to a 2 from a 1. So all of that is mixed in there.
Is there a benefit to Sam from that employee having a higher level?
What we're trying to do is deal with.
Well, it's part of the MOU.
It's part of the
Doesn't
MOU,
matter.
and it's also part of the succession planning because we're hoping that with our staff, encouraging them to take on more training and becoming more qualified, that when the lead collections worker retires, that we will in-house have someone who could potentially promote up to that position. Otherwise, you really have a huge skill gap between the lead and everyone else. If there isn't some sort of motivation to continue their education.
Okay, so it's not what I had in mind, but it is in fact still a benefit to the agency.
It is a benefit to the agency. You want people continuing to learn. Part of the problem that SAM has suffered from is that staff has not got outside of the sort of the little bubble of the coastside to see what the industry is doing. And they had fallen behind on industry practices. And so part of what we've done is to get rid of that.
But isn't that why they go to the, like, what is it, CWEA?
Dinners?
The conferences or seminars? Or
Only
whatever.
one goes. It would cost too much to send all 5 employees to the conferences. What they do is they go to those monthly meetings, but sometimes the topics at those meetings are more or less relevant to SAM. I mean, a lot of times the conversations are about things that are changing on the bay side, which would not affect us because we're an ocean discharge. So a lot of those changes don't affect us. They also are about plants that are doing things that we're not doing, or services that we don't provide through our contract services. So sometimes it's relevant. What they really need to do is get relevant training specific to the services and needs that we have. And when they do that and they decide they want to take the exam for the higher certification, then that means that we don't pay them for their study time or their test time. They do that on their own, and then we recognize the benefit of that because they're advancing their skill set.
Okay, any more questions?
Do our SAM reps recommend approval of this budget?
We don't have to approve it at this meeting, because we're gonna approve our final budget at our next June meeting. We generally do them at the same time. Plus, I wanna be able to send around the contract collections that has been circulated, and also show you, Jim and Leonard have seen Half Moon Bay's proposal, but the 3 of you haven't, so I'll circulate that around and take a look at that.
Just to let you know the timing, SAM has to adopt a budget no later than June 30th. And the contract collection services, same thing. That's the deadline for both.
Yeah, we'll be in front of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you,
for the
Beverly.
questions.
Thank you,
Okay,
Beverly.
Thanks.
So for tonight, this is not an action item.
You could make it one if you'd like, it's your board's decision, but it's not, doesn't have to be now.
So you're sure that hunting it next month is not gonna be a problem?
No. Our meeting's before theirs every month, so.
Now, of course, if we punt it to next month, then we'll know what that is, what Montera and Half Moon Bay have done.
Well, the interesting part of all this, and I told John Dowdy this today, is what SAM does, the SAM board does with the Half Moon Bay collections agreement. Because I don't know how you approve it as it is, not knowing what's gonna happen in year 2. And it is a 3-year agreement.
Did you send Jonathan's list of 15 to?
No, I will though.
Yeah, that needs to get to the right person at SAM right away. I don't know, maybe just send it to Beverly and she'll decide what else to do with it.
Right. Okay,
And send it to us too.
I will.
I haven't seen it.
Okay.
I have just one comment, which is, it is good to see that a lot of these capital projects are getting done.
Yes.
That's good news.
All right, so we're gonna declare this agenda item finished for tonight.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Beverly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 3, back to the agenda.
Okay.
Item 3, consideration of Granada Community Services District draft fiscal year 2018-19 budget and potential associated sewer service charge increase.
Okay, I've presented the budget to your board for approval. There's 2 budgets in front of you. One is the,
So, in your staff memo, the last bullet item is like repeated in the next paragraph.
Yes, it is.
yes. Well,
Is that just-
part of this was, I don't know, who allowed a special board meeting last week to be scheduled while we were preparing for this board meeting, so I did do this late at night, so I apologize for that.
It wasn't my choice.
I was.
Better than leaving things out,
Yes.
saying things twice.
You get two chances to understand it.
Yeah.
So our budget, as you can see, the budget numbers are pretty self-explanatory, so the larger issue we have this year is presented the 5-year plan, a look ahead, where I show the potential increase in the sewer service charge. I'd also like to point out a error I caught on page 72, or I don't know if it's your 72. The sewer non-operating revenues? Oh, no, I take it back. Where was it? Where's the SAM costs?
It's on page 7.
70? On page 70, I have a line item number 3 under operating expenses, and this only concerns the 17-18 budget. The SAM environmental compliance number, that 42,456.
Wait, I'm lost. Down there.
Oh, down there,
Yeah,
okay.
down there. That's actually included in the 955, so I've already corrected that
Wait a
in
minute,
my budget.
which numbers?
The 42,456,
Yeah.
that is included in the 955 up above.
Okay.
So we had added a line item and didn't get caught. So it's correct in the fiscal year 18-19 budget, but looking backwards, it's not. So as always, every year, for the most part, our expenses stay the same. You know, we get a little bit of fluctuation in various things, but we're pretty steady. More to the point is the money we send over from property taxes. So we get approximately $600,000 a year in property taxes, and your board last year decided to allocate $400,000 of that to parks. Now, doing so reduces the sewer side revenues by $400,000. So to offset that, we would have to do service charge increases, which your board, or the board at the time, understood when we became a Parks and Recreation district.
And for the record, that was stated in the LAFCO application for reorg.
Right, so there's two parts to this. One is if we want to keep pace with our sewer service, we have to increase the sewer service charge, as I show. We would only do a 3-year increase. I show a 5-year look ahead, but we can only do 3 years due to Prop 218 provisions. So, but the other decision your board has to make is, do you want to keep sending $400,000 to the park side? I think I've heard broad agreement for that in the past, but it's a discretionary decision your board has to make each year.
I think that we should keep doing that and building up the Parks Reserve Fund, because hopefully at some point in the near future, we'll have the opportunity to acquire some more of the Burnham Strip parcels.
Yes, and the parcels across the street and potentially the old fire station. I mean,
Oh, I forgot about those two.
I think this community really wants to see those in public use, and we won't be able to do it if we don't have the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to build reserves for, we don't have any idea how much Burnham Park or the median, actually producing the parks we're promising people is gonna cost, so.
Right.
We need that money.
Well, we're gonna charge non-GCSD residents a lot to park there.
Yeah.
And part of this, you know, I've got the sewer budget obviously nailed down pretty well, and our administrative costs and whatnot. The parks budget, you know, I have no idea what we're gonna spend, because we don't have the plan in place yet. So I'm putting place markers in here for the park side, but, you know, that's just what they are, place markers, so I want you all to understand that.
My concern, even looking at just the next fiscal year, and I'm trying to remember what page this is on, is that with the sewer service charge increase that you used in here, and I don't know if that's a suggestion or a sample.
It's a suggestion.
It still results in a substantial drawdown of the sewer reserve.
What page are you looking at?
I don't know, I looked at this a couple days
If
ago.
you look at page 70 or 76, that's where I show the drawdown.
Yeah, I guess that's it. So even just looking at 18-19, there's a drawdown of, well, transfer from operating budget, 382,000, but then we're spending 832,000. I hope nobody's dyslexic. And so the net change to that reserve is down by
50.
Or is that 450?
Plus or minus $450,000, yeah.
So when was the last sewer service charge increase?
We did an increase in 2009 for 3 years. It's currently at 402.
So it's been
So it's been 6 years since we increased rates, and we're still by far the lowest on the coast side and probably the lowest in this broader area. I mean, you got places like Atherton, you can't, it's a little bit of apples to oranges because they've got bigger, they're like my Rancho Santa Fe district where they've got large lots with much pipeline in between. So, you know, they're at $1,300 a year, so.
Yeah, except that the bulk of our cost is treatment, and that doesn't, the treatment cost is not affected by how far the house,
No,
how far apart the houses
right.
are.
Can we see some of those numbers? Do we have to, do we have to decide this tonight?
You
Yes,
don't.
yes. If we're gonna do a sewer service charge increase, yeah, otherwise, we're not gonna make it by the tax collector's cutoff.
Well, we have August 10th is the tax collector's cutoff.
You sure? I thought they moved it up to July 30th. What was that, Julia?
July
July
31st.
I have to submit it by July 31st. I just don't see much information on it.
When you keep saying potentially, is it really potential increase, or is there any increase of it because of anything to do with the sewer collection system, anything to do, or it's purely our decision on the allocation towards parks that's gonna drive that?
It's two things. It's the allocation that you make toward parks as well as the capital projects we do.
So it's a little bit of
And what's
both.
changed a little bit over past years is Sam actually has a capital improvement program moving forward that will cost us approximately $500,000 or $600,000 a year.
And the increased costs of sand.
And the increased cost of sand as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this suggested 15% a year from the figure it is now, or is it?
402.
It's compounded every year?
So 402 goes to 460, goes to 520, goes to 580.
And is that
3 years.
15%, is that 15% on the new one each year, or
It's
15% on the original
Slightly
one?
less, because it's a static increase, it's $60
And so-
each year. right?
Okay.
So,
I should know this, but how does it get calculated?
how does what get calculated?
Sewer rates.
By this. The way you look at your reserve level, that's why I do this look ahead
No,
5 years.
if I'm a ratepayer, I pay a certain amount per 100,000 assessed value? How
Oh, no.
That's
It's
what I
a
don't even
flat
know.
fee. If you own
For
a house, you
residential.
pay $402.
For
How many?
resident,
How much?
$402 a year.
Okay.
no
for
matter what.
residential, it's a flat fee. For commercial,
And it's funny, I tell this story, I don't
I
probably
should
like
have
to say
known
it
this,
out
but-
loud, but I do anyway. We did a rate increase down in my Rancho Santa Fe district, and I agonized over, should I do this much or $50? And when you look at it, that, you know, a $50 increase is $4 a month. It's, you know, you start comparing this to your, you know, your utility bills, paying $40 a month in sewer service charge, or 50, the drop in the bucket compared to your cable, your cell phone, your electricity, everything.
Unless you have solar.
on the other hand,
Unless you have solar.
I should dig up an old, you know, I sold the properties in 2016, but I should dig up a San Francisco water bill, which also includes the sewer service charge. Sewer service charge in San Francisco is 1.5 times roughly what the water charge is. And both of those are ridiculously high. So for usage comparable to here, you pay like 3 times as much in San Francisco.
Well, that's why I say, at 460, you're still the lowest. At 580, you're still the lowest on the coast side.
So,
And the
Half
lowest
Bay-
in the county, or almost the
We're
lowest?
darn close to the lowest in the county.
I think we still are. San Carlos, Belmont, San Mateo, South City have all gone up. Atherton and Hillsborough are a completely different league.
Right.
and the county-run sanitation districts in the hills have just exorbitant sewer service charges because they're very small and there's a lot of maintenance and, well, guess county staff is not the most efficient ones to run
And
those.
several of those are having major capital projects.
The county lost two Prop 218 hearings a few years ago there. Which is
So what we do, looking
unheard of.
ahead, is, we've got a capital project for that Medio Bridge crossing, which is supposed to cost $350,000-$400,000 next year.
Right.
After that, we would continue our program of replacing the 1920s sewer mains we have here. That's
We have
what
to
this
do
5-year
this.
project, look ahead
And
does.
that's my question, if we isolate out that separately from parks, what would we be looking at an increase just for the capital improvements and the sewer infrastructure?
I didn't understand.
I lost you.
Outside of the allocation to parks, forget parks ever happened.
You're saying if we
Yeah,
weren't.
if you kept the 400 grand here in the sewer service side,
But this agency made a commitment to the voters of this area that
if you
the
did,
property taxes would go up.
eventually you'd still have to raise sewer rates, again, because of increased costs at SAM on an operations side and their capital improvement program. They're looking at spending $2 million a year on out for the next, you pick the number of years. So we would have to do the increase. And we always knew this day was coming, they just didn't have a plan in place.
And, the other potential issue, it seems to have gone below ground in recent years, but there's always the potential that when the state gets tight on money, which is going to happen every few years, at least every, 7 years, they start looking at district reserves and property taxes and trying to come up with a way to take away the property tax from enterprise districts. So the thinking when the reorg proposal is put together is either we shift the property tax to the non-enterprise function of Parks and Rec and have to raise the sewer service charges, or we don't shift it and they take it away and we lose it and we have to raise sewer service charges. So the end point is the same, we have to raise sewer service charges.
And am I correct that a commitment was made to, when the reorganization happened, when people voted to make this a parks district, that there would be resources for parks?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that was an integral part of the proposal to LAFCO, yes, and as Leonard points out, it was spelled out in the LAFCO staff report that they made us, when we circulated this, we had to say we will increase sewer service charges.
And the direction of the legislature since Prop 13, way back in,
78.
Wow. Am I that old? The direction of the legislature since then is thou shalt not use property tax for enterprise functions. So-
Enterprise functions being things you can charge fees for, sewer, water, that kind of thing.
I guess the only line of logic I'm having a problem following is in terms of if we're doing this with knowing that the primary driver of this is to acquire more land in terms of some of those things, I almost feel like if that's, when the time comes for those types of things, there's other agencies that could get involved in terms of a multi-use facility, whether, community or anything else, and I feel like, there's a...
That's a pipe dream that in reality some of us have pursued for years and it's gone nowhere.
So...
We pursue it privately for various reasons, and a number of agencies have been approached and every single one of them has explicitly, very clearly said, we have no interest.
No, I get that. I mean, there needs to be someone to step up. I guess what I'm saying is even how this discussion's rolled out the last couple minutes in terms of basically the primary reason for the rate increase is that to acquire more land.
The whole
if we
strip
take
is
that
supposed to be a
variable,
park.
if we take that variable out of it, or we, say we're not, there's no need to acquire more land until we put to use the land that we already have in terms of investing resources in it, is there even a need to increase rates at all? If we take that out of it.
We'll still be, let's pretend for argument's sake, I kept the 400 grand in the sewer service side, we'd still be showing a deficit of $100,000 plus or minus. So we are at a negative, yes.
Okay, and that's where I'm kind of getting at in terms of
So
that.
would the increase have to
Yeah.
be as high? Maybe not. Well, not maybe not. It
Yeah.
wouldn't be. But again, we start splitting hairs here over $40, you know, if I have a flaw, David, I've kept the sewer service charge too low.
Yeah.
You know, and that won't happen in the future, it's because it's much easier to increase it 4% a year versus 15% a year.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that as well in
Yeah.
terms of the, you know, preventing the shock from those large increases,
Right.
the gradual nature of it. I'm just wondering in terms of making that, you know, making that decision in terms of what that needs to be, if we.
And here's what I'll say to you, because
Yeah.
I've done this in my other districts, this is a 3-year rate increase, it's not a 5-year rate increase, it's a 3-year rate increase if your board approves it. You know, it's fluid, if at the end of 3 years, your board looks at it and goes, hey, we got $1.5 million on the park side that we're not using and have no plans to use, then you don't do further increases, or you could even decrease it if you wanted to. I don't think you'll want to or need to, because we've got increasing costs, but, you know, it's not set in stone forever. Yeah, your board will have discretionary
As one data
choices.
point, by the way, when I took office at the end of '97, the sewer service charge was $365 a year. So in real dollars, it's actually lower now,
Wow.
still.
Well, I did the calculation, you know, we've increased a % or 2 a year since that time. Spread it out, what we've done, so.
But what if you say that Sam's an integral part of getting that final flow out clean, and you factor all those costs that our community is paying? It's not as attractive as it seems to be comparing it to one agency that's handling everything A to Z. Our rates, you know, our community members we're paying for Sam's resources that are going into that. So that's part of, all 3 agencies could say, oh, we're lower than other comparable agencies, but that comparable agency is doing some of the functions that Sam's handling.
We're paying this for the
What you're
same
saying makes
functions.
no sense at all, because instead of running our own sewer plant and paying X amount for it, we own a share of the SAM plant and we pay X minus something.
And all I'm saying is that you'd have to find, if you really want to talk the bottom line rates, you have to find comparables that operate under similar circumstances. There's not really a true comparable comparing it to places like San Francisco.
What's
Well, it's, again, that's why I say it's
Yeah.
apples to oranges. you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, no, and I'm
But
just
the
saying in
cost
terms
is
of.
the cost.
When I was up at Ramona, they had a water rate structure that was almost twice what the people in the valley were. It's because they had to pump every drop of water up Mount Woodson. And pumping water up Mount Woodson costs a heck of a lot of money. So, you know, I've got 3 districts within a stone's throw of each other down in San Diego. One charges $800, one charges $950, and one charges $400.
And those are similar sized to
They're
us.
similar sized plants, they're just different animals, there's broader rate bases.
But the point is, they're
One has a
charging more
rate
than
base of 3,000 people, the other has a rate base of 1,500.
But let's also notice that they're over double what our current one is.
Right.
And the only part I guess I'm struggling with is I know, you know, just me getting beat down in terms of making a decision on this in terms of if we need to raise them for the sewer infrastructure, capital improvements, for sure. If it's part of the execution of the current land that we hold to carry out parks, for sure. If it's for acquisition of new lands, if that's part of it, why the rate increase took place, and that's, you know, I feel like, you know, I don't know if I could vote for that, if that's the major piece of what the funding's for.
So you're
that's
not
my
in
own-
favor of buying the empty lot by the post office?
You know, I think that, ideally, I think that if that's gonna be, I know that Leonard says it's impossible, I think that there's a way that multiple agencies can get involved. I think the county needs a presence on the mid-coast. I feel like whether it's through leases or a direct investment, I think that, to me, that would be the route that I would like to see pursued. I think at one point, an agency might need to step up and do it, but you know, I think until then, I think before giving up on it, you know, I'd like to see it pursued that way.
What is
I'd like
that,
to
what
keep
what is
local
that route?
control.
We're gonna ask the county to buy it and then share it with us?
No, just in terms of they have a need for satellite presence, whether it's when they come out for presentations or rangers or whatever else, some type of joint, you know, where there could be multiple agencies having some dedicated space and facilities, sharing meeting rooms, you know, when they were reserved, things like that, so that you know, multiple agencies, could have their meetings there and use the facilities.
You mean like this
And,
room that is used by multiple agencies?
Yeah, in some sense, so, things like that.
No other agency has a big enough need that they will have their own dedicated space. That's why it doesn't exist, that's why nothing can be arranged. They just have no interest because they don't have the need. In any case,
I feel like that property is so important, we need local control. It needs
yes,
to be
absolutely.
a local
And when things come
resource.
up for sale, you have to have the money. You can't go, oh, well, we're interested, but we don't have the money. And my feeling is that you're intentionally trying to set us up for failure that way, because you don't want to acquire
No,
more land.
I'm trying to think this through in terms of you know, I don't know if we're voting on this right now, but in terms of feedback that I've gotten in terms of this question of raising rates and what are you guys really raising rates on, and, you know, just
Again,
handling
that was
those.
an integral part of the park
Yeah.
application, and that 60% of the people approved. It said in there, we're gonna have to raise rates if we divert property tax. So,
So can I ask it just what on the budget is this, the sewer service charge rate and reserve study?
that was going to be a rate and reserve study. Your district, I was gonna outsource this. Your district is so small and quite honestly simple, you know, we don't need it. I have 2 districts that I do the same thing for. I have a 3rd district that I outsourced it because it's more complicated. We've got 2 treatment plants, we've got a 5-year capital improvement program, we've got 18 pump stations. You know, we're static here. We've got their costs and our costs don't vary a lot, so that's,
So, we're saving that-
I was gonna outsource it for $20,000 and instead, we can do this, so.
So you know, since I said before that we should have done the rate increase last year,
When I put it on the agenda.
we're gonna arm wrestle after the meeting.
No, we're gonna go look at last year's agenda. There'll be no wrestling.
Didn't put it on the agenda in time to get it to the tax collector. I think that, you know, given that $800,000 drawdown, $832,000, I think we need to think about a bigger increase the first year, because we've gone 6 years without a rate increase. And, you know, in some sense, it looks good not having rate increases, but I think most people are more comfortable with a rate increase every year that's much smaller instead of this sawtooth that this district uses. The sawtooth is a little jarring when you're not, when you're used to having no increases and then all of a sudden it goes like that.
Well, but we also have had things that change, which is your board deciding to send $400,000 over to the park side. Because, you know, up until now, we've spent $150,000 maybe in 3 years, and most of that was to buy the empty property, so.
And so I guess that's where, you know, to me, that's the biggest issue with it. It's really the perception of it more than anything else in terms of, people are looking at it and saying, wait a second, you guys have been, you know, had the Parks Power for a couple of years now. You guys have, only major money has been spent on land. Now you're saying you want to raise my sewer rates to get more money to buy more land potentially, where you guys haven't even done anything yet. I think it's more of, to the point of like, you know, the community where I think where I get some backlash from is I think if things were already being executed and they saw those dollars going to work, I think people would feel more comfortable in terms of, okay, yeah, like you said, this ain't, I'll spend you know, even couple $100 more, whatever. That's nothing in the scheme of things for great facilities, but I think the perception of it though is that here we are already raising rates and we haven't even executed on any you know, park facilities. And so in that sense, I think it's almost, there's this level of distrust in terms of, wait a second, you guys are raising the rates already, why don't you deliver on one park project that you guys could claim, and then you could come and raise my rates to go after more of my money for future projects that I now trust you guys are gonna execute on. I think right now there's a level of mistrust that this is all about just acquiring land, This is,
It's funny because you're the only person in the whole district that I've ever heard that from.
I'm talking about feedback from ratepayers concerned about
I've
approaching
never
me
heard it.
multiple times.
Well, you're
about-
also forgetting an important descriptor there, which is, all of a sudden you're gonna raise rates for the first time in 6 years. You've had Parks Rec Authority for, since October 2014, and you haven't raised rates yet. So now you're gonna have to raise rates, and that was part of the deal that you've voters supported.
Well,
And people are gonna see things
Absolutely.
happening.
And that's what I'm saying.
We're
I
about
think
to
it's
do
not so
parks.
much the issue at hand, it's more the perception of it, right? I feel like if we already did have some of these things executed, it'd be a much easier sell and almost like impossible to oppose in terms of, yeah, you guys are, I think it is a tougher sell.
Oh, I agree with
Because
that.
everything that's been done related to parks is total, myopic in terms of planning and things like that, but nothing that people have seen shovel ready.
I agree, if we had shovel ready, or we were building something right now, it would be an easier sell.
Yeah,
Sure.
and that's all I'm getting at, is in terms of people saying, well, you guys are going after more of my money, what have you guys done already? In terms of, if we had that already, it'd be a much easier sell, and that's all I'm saying, the perception of it.
All right, agreed. Now, the problem is that things come up for sale once, and if we want it for Parks and Rec functions, and we don't buy it when it comes up for sale, it will never again be available for that purpose, because somebody else will buy it and build on it. So when the fire district splits off the vacant thing next to the post office, if we don't buy it, somebody else is gonna put a building there. When they surplus out the current fire station, if we don't buy it, somebody else is gonna put a building there. We lose permanently if we don't have the money in hand to buy the properties when they become available.
But couldn't we finance it still? There's financing and loans, and I don't think we
That
can.
ends up costing a lot more, the $100 million school bond is gonna cost $200 million after interest. No, that's ridiculous.
Well, and I think you all understand David's point, so,
Yes.
but, yeah.
So,
You've gotta make a decision.
what
one way or the
I'm
other.
looking at in this proposed budget, at 2018-19, the Parks and Rec Reserve at the end of 2018-19 is $584,000. That's not enough to buy the 2 properties from the fire district.
And build the 2 parks that we're hoping to build
Right.
and
So-
really get started in the next, I'm hoping in the next 6 months we'll be breaking ground. That may be optimistic, but
So
we're trying.
the smallest rate increase that I would entertain is what Chuck suggests. And depending on how the other directors feel, should we talk about playing catch-up here for the 6 years of no increases?
What would you propose?
Probably at least 20%, maybe 25% for the first year, and then drop back to the 15% that Chuck is showing. Uh, 20% would take it up to basically 500 a year, which is still far below what Half Moon Bay's will be and far below what Montera's will be. And still, even at 500, it'll probably still end up being the lowest or second lowest in the county. I forget who the lowest is, but San Carlos, if you read the newspaper a few months ago, they were looking at jacking it up over a 5-year period to $1,300 a month.
Well, and
Remember?
Montera's
I mean,
got
you're-
on their
right.
books some large increases, I can't remember off the top of my head, but they're gonna literally double their sewer service charge over the
Really?
next 3 or 5 years.
People are screaming up there, too.
Are they?
Oh, yeah.
So how much is the Parks and Rec fund right now?
334,000?
Yes.
Wait, that's all?
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
again, this gets deep. Property tax is discretionary, so you can't take sewer funds and apply them to things. But since we've been a parks district in October 2014, we've collected, I don't know, $1.8 million in property taxes. So theoretically, you can tap into that, but then once you do that, you're drawing down the sewer reserves to a big level, so.
What about the requirement in terms of the building also? You're saying that, but what's stopping us from classifying that as, part of that purchase acquisition, the land, as a GCSD building facility.
Well, if
You
we
could.
build an office building, whatever.
And community center, I mean, that could be allocated later, but I'm
Let
saying
me finish a
acquiring
sentence,
it.
please. If we build an office building, whatever fraction of the office building is devoted to the sewer side will be charged to the sewer reserve. So
Yeah. So financing it would be very possible in terms of, because we could allocate that
Refinance
with the
other
position we're
things,
in, yeah.
So, all right, the two of us have had this back and forth. What about the other three directors? What do you think we should look at for increase? Matthew, Jim?
I think
Barbara?
a 20% increase is a hard sell. And I think that the Chuck's devised, to me, it's a responsible budget. It doesn't get us, $3 million in Parks and Rec reserve in a hurry, but we don't know that we're gonna need that in a hurry, so.
Yeah, looking at the numbers we actually have in the Parks and Rec, building the Burnham Park is not gonna be cheap. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean, actually, to your point, we need the money to build a park.
So,
And hopefully something on 7 and 8.
so here's a number for you. If I did the arithmetic correctly, which I think I did, 24% increase, and I actually worked it backwards to get to the 24%. I didn't pick 24%. But a 24% rate increase gets us to $499. Under $500.
No sales tax?
Okay, well then we've got two things on the table. One is this, the schedule I laid out. Leonard is suggesting going to
Yeah, are there details on it somewhere in here? or
499. Details on what?
Your proposed increase?
It's on a single line somewhere,
It's, if you look at my 5-year projected revenue table,
page
Well,
75.
Leonard, Chuck's building it in 3 years here, so
you go to page 75
you're talking about
at the top. You can see my
24%,
sewer service charge
and then how
goes
much
from
next
402 to
year?
460.
15.
And then on page 76,
24,
it
15,
shows what
15.
that increase does to our bottom line, which is our
Okay.
reserve fund.
So, in case everybody didn't hear it, because there were two conversations going on, Matthew asked me, what about the first year? So what I'm suggesting is 24% year one, then 15% year two, 15% year three.
That seems like, I think it would be better to have a big second year when actually things are being constructed.
But remember, the 15% will be on top of the
And again,
24%.
if you want to increase it again next year above what you've decided this year, you can. You just have to do another Prop 218 process.
Jim?
24 seems like a lot.
But
Well,
I
Matthew
computed it to
seemed
make
to
it
balk
under
at
500.
20. If you think 24 is too much, that's why I did 15, 15, 15. It keeps our reserves between $2.5 and $3 million.
How about 18, 18, 18?
And this is where I got, where we're splitting hairs.
Now, one of the things that I hope we would
14
do,
and 18.
one of the things I hope we would do is every year just round it to some dollar, whole dollar.
I did.
Right, but if we talk about
460,
weird,
well, that's why I kept it flat, 465. I mean, it's my recommendation, you adopt that rate schedule and we move forward. And it's not 20, it's not above 20%, it's roughly 15, plus or minus.
so lay out the timeline. If we tell you tonight, go start the 218 process, what's the timeline?
It's, I have to give 45-day notice prior to a public hearing, so.
That takes us to the end of June.
Right.
Okay, and then we'd schedule a special meeting?
Well, we could do it in July at our regular meeting, because that'll be 60 days away.
Okay.
We have to turn around the 218 process quickly, but I've already got a flyer written from previous years.
Okay, so that still cuts it fairly close, but
Yes,
it
it
works.
does. And if we need to have a special meeting or we need to push the July meeting back because of it, then we can.
But remember that the tax collector has to have the information.
I understand.
By
July 30th.
Okay, so our meeting there is
You're in August.
1, 2, 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3. So basically, we've got a week and a half.
Is that a complicated process, or do you just turn it in?
It's just nuts and bolts. I can get a flyer up this weekend. Can they print it and mail it in basically a week and a half? Should be, I don't know.
We used to use some outside computer guy to generate our stuff for the tax
Yeah.
collector. Are we doing that in-house now?
Yeah,
Good.
have been for years.
Yeah, just wanted to make sure.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion one way or the other?
So the motion would be to direct staff to start the 218 process for a 15, 15, 15 rate increase?
Yes. With the rate increase being for the next 3 years,
60 bucks a year.
the 460, 520, and 580.
Somebody want to make that motion?
It's actually $58 the first year.
Yes.
I will move that we start the 218 process at the rate increase schedule as presented.
Seconds.
Moved and seconded. Let's say no further discussion. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I'm gonna abstain, and just on the grounds that, you know, I feel like I wish there was more, you know, I wish there was people here as passionate as they were earlier in terms of, I feel like I still have some unanswered questions, but mainly just on the grounds I feel like we do need a little increase. I would be comfortable voting for that to definitely cover the capital improvements, sewer infrastructure, and, you know, anything we need for park. I just feel like I just really feel like we need to get something going in terms of execution before we're committing more resources towards just buying up land and not doing anything with it. So I'm just abstaining on those
I
grounds.
think the rest of us are in agreement with part of what you said. We gotta get
Yeah.
something moving on the park side. And,
All right, we're pushing
Okay,
midnight.
we'll move
And I think and
Are we
we're going to
ready?
be
okay.
even more passionate about it if we don't have any progress on parks,
Yeah.
if we don't have the money.
Okay, item 4. Consideration of appointing ad hoc litigation mediation committee. Did you try saying that out loud before you wrote that?
All right. You have to appoint an ad hoc litigation mediation committee. This came out of our last meeting. So what is your pleasure of who to appoint? Who wants to be on it?
Well, unfortunately, I probably need to be on it. Well, it's gonna be time that my wife is gonna resent, but,
Yes.
you know, essentially being the institutional memory here and understanding all this stuff the best, I really feel like I need to be on it.
I'm talking to that.
Hmm?
I'm talking to it.
I mean, you do have a source of knowledge and history that is good, good insight in terms of that.
So then the question is, who would the other person be?
I'd express interest just in terms of, you know, just in terms of the whole mediation process of being able you know, to get this done successfully. I think initially you know, purely as it relates to mediation, I don't even know, you know, I was thinking through the process if I was a member, if I would even say anything, you know, outside of, you know, whispering in Jonathan's ear or whatever in terms of how much I would let the legal counsel kind of take over, but I feel like where I could add value is in terms of the, just assessment, in terms of reading into what's going on, some of the decisions and kind of that behind the scenes inside of it. You know, I think I could add value on
I
that.
think a big chunk of it will be the director's evaluation of the public reaction to whatever we agree to.
Yeah,
That-
yeah.
I figure that's the primary purpose of having the directors there, is to advise the staff on whether we think the public's gonna accept it or go ballistic.
Perfect. You two seem to have different public input, so that's good. That'll
That's right.
spread it around.
So
Done.
none of the other three of you are interested.
Well, I'm gonna be gone, I'm leaving the day after the junior meeting, coming back the day before the July meeting.
But we have no idea when this is gonna be. And I'll be gone a few days and, well.
When is this
I'm
likely
not
to
gonna say
be?
on camera when.
It'll be a few months before we even have a date set, a couple months before the date set.
Yeah, so we're talking August or something?
September.
You don't.
Can you have an alternate?
Well, we don't even need to appoint this right now, since we don't even have a mediator yet, so why don't we kick
Yeah,
it down the
let's-
road
yeah.
and figure out what's happening?
Yeah.
May as well.
Table.
Okay?
And, you know, it's also possible that it won't even get that far, maybe.
Right.
Maybe with the change in city council looming, maybe the city will come to their senses.
Is anyone adverse to letting Bill go? Not permanently, but
What?
letting Bill go home?
This.
Oh.
I thought you said meant go to the mediation.
Well, let's.
I
look
don't
at
think
what
we
else
have any more legal items, and he's got an hour-long drive.
Sure, yes.
Drive
Yeah,
carefully.
unless Bill has something for attorney's report, I don't see anything
I have
else
no
here where we
report.
really need him.
Okay, thank
Take
you.
off, Bill.
Drive safe.
Thank you, Bill.
Drive safe.
Would someone like to make a motion letting me go?
Where are you driving to?
A hotel somewhere.
Yeah, exactly, about 300 yards down the road.
Which hotel?
The Harbor View.
Oh, that thing.
Yeah.
Well, this is not keeping your hands.
Okay, so item 4 is tabled to a date uncertain,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Item 5, consideration of approving Director Seaton's request to attend special district legislative days.
So I recommend that your board approve reimbursing David for attending the special district's legislative days?
Does this take a motion?
Yes.
I will move that we reimburse Director Seaton to go to the district's, CSDA Special Districts Legislative Days in Sacramento.
Second.
With the understanding that state law requires him to provide a
Detailed.
report to the board at the next regular meeting, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
been moved and seconded, those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions, motion carries. Item 6. Doing that Tip O'Neill style. Item 6, consideration of sewer authority mid-coast side report. The short version is we spent too much time in closed session. Is there a longer version, Joe?
No, pretty much, we had that one up there.
I think
Issue-
we-
the
I
main
think
issue
we
here was a
beat,
little, um,
Sam business to death.
Depending liability, you know, so on the contract with Half Moon Bay, we asked them to review the liability issues.
Good night.
That was the only thing. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I don't think Half Moon Bay had the slightest bit of understanding what we were objecting to.
That was the main issue there.
Well, the main issues on that contract collections thing, which I don't believe were explained, what happens in year 2 when all the costs go down and their costs stay fixed.
I don't think we got an explanation tonight either.
The liability issue that Jim brought up, and there's also pension issues that are contained in the contract.
Is it
So.
the city's living in fantasy land?
I don't know why it's even on the agenda. I don't know how our boards
which
approve
one?
it, and if our boards, or our 2 members approve it. I told John Dowdy that, so.
Well, Beverly insists that because it's Sam signing the contract, the Sam board has to authorize signing the contract.
I agree with that.
Okay.
Right.
So.
Which means you two, one of these two have to vote yes. And I don't know how you vote yes.
It's gonna be interesting.
Yep.
We might just have to be somewhere else that night. So the regular business, 7A, authorize the general manager to execute a contract, we just talked about that, didn't happen, got punted over to one of the SAM committees. 7B, adopt a resolution setting regular board meetings as the fourth Monday. That got, that one sort of fell through a crack in the floor.
Operations committee.
Oh, it did? Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, we have to handle that.
And 7C, discuss and give direction to the general manager regarding memorializing the member agency managers meetings.
Same thing.
I think that got punted to a committee.
Right, same thing.
So then we're leaving going, why didn't we have this meeting?
Must have been running close to 9, huh?
Yeah, I think we were out of there at 8:30. Okay, so I don't know, is there anything else? There's a special SAM board meeting this Monday night, which will be mostly closed session, I think. I forgot already. I looked at the agenda, but forgot what was
It's
on it.
closed session, and then there was the whole funding business, which I don't
Oh,
think
yeah,
needs to be
authorize
discussed.
the general manager to draw down the emergency repairs capital reserve to meet payroll. And it's like, but there's 211,000 unencumbered in the checking account.
Moving along.
Plus, she's gonna be receiving or picking up a check from us tomorrow.
Probably have me bail already.
Well, she was gonna send somebody here, and Chuck said, no, Delia will drive it down there. And we have to pay mileage instead of Sam. All right, so I think we're at the consent agenda.
Yes.
I have a question on the consent agenda.
Okay, what is it?
Page 109, item 1, what? The agenda was reordered?
Yes.
Item 1, the last line of the first paragraph says, Director Dye noted that some of the numbers in the budget documents she had seen did not tie out correctly. What?
That's an accounting term. They don't match from document to document.
I've never seen that term, so it's correct as written?
Yes.
Oh,
Okay, I have a question as well. Item 5 on 108, the bottom of it on the top of 109, one Director Clark moved to have staff notify the counties
And
of
we
the.
took no further action.
And so
so there was no second and no vote?
there was no, that didn't transmogrify into a motion and got voted on?
No, it did.
I missed that one. Usually I
And
catch
on that, I mean, just for the record, I think the idea is that we're committed to funding a pump track in Quarry Park or elsewhere, wherever it works out, if they can get one that works.
Well, but this is only to the
Yeah.
county. So
Yeah.
the county owns Quarry Park.
Good
We do
point.
it elsewhere. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'd probably, you can approve them and we'll fix that on the motion? We have notes on it.
Yeah, okay.
So, so the one correction is what Matthew?
So the correction is we'll look at our notes and figure out who seconded and what the vote was.
And so, clarify for me what exactly was the outcome of item 5? Is the district agreeing to fund it?
Yes, Sam Hertzberg from County Parks said the only reason the pump track is in the Quarry Park plan was because the district said they were going to fund it. So we just wanted to reiterate to Sam that the district indeed was looking
We
to
did
fund
it
it.
last year. We told them, we wrote them a letter last year.
Okay, I wanna state for the record, and this can go in the meeting minutes for this meeting, that if I was there at that meeting, I would have argued that if we're gonna be providing funding, then we need to have some influence over how the money is used.
Well,
And not
this
just
isn't a
be-
blank, this
I
isn't a
agree.
blank check. We
I
just,
couldn't agree more.
yeah, this is gonna come back to your board. They're not gonna send me a bill for $65,000. Yeah. so.
Actually, Sam Hertzberg had wanted to schedule a meeting with our general manager to discuss, how much involvement we want in the process, so they're totally open to.
There needs to be some control by this board over how the project is implemented before we commit to the funding.
I completely agree.
I agree
with that.
100%. I think all the board does. I think from what he presented and talking to him, I feel like their main thing is they want to know that we're going to be there for the financial commitment. Even though he did keep saying, even though you guys have said that you guys have all the resources in the community, he keeps saying that's great. We believe that you guys your people in the community are gonna step up and deliver that, but we just need to know that you guys have those resources there, whether it comes from you guys or filled by the community, so that we can move forward with the CEQA, everything else they need to do. You know, with the county board of supervisors, you know, that's kind of contingent on us saying, hey, if people, and you know, all these people say we're gonna donate all the free dirt, if that breaks down, we're gonna be the ones that step up and pays for the dirt, things like that.
But I think we need to see their.
Yeah, for sure.
Design
of it, everything.
Let's say tentative final plan.
Absolutely, 100%, yeah.
And if we don't like the tentative final plan, then we tell them you need to make these changes or we're not gonna provide the funding.
Yeah, yeah. Why?
I'd also like to see, and I'm not sure how you could craft this, but something, you know, that this would be, obviously, on their website is one of the things available at the park, but it did not be advertised as a regional resource. You know, I don't know if we could put that in there or not, but I'd like to see something like that. It says, you know, I'm not saying keep it secret, have it on your website, show it on your maps, do all that, but let's not have big flashing, you know.
Well, there have been a number of community members that ever since the signs went up saying County Park, they want those signs taken down.
Yeah.
Barbara, I think that's it.
So, all right, consent agenda.
As soon as something like this gets built, it goes on the internet and it's across the country.
Yeah.
Okay,
I just want to minimize impacts if it's gonna happen.
Yeah, I think it was a sort of a challenge to all the pump track advocates who've been in here saying, we'll do it, we've got the money, we've got the funding, we've got the materials. So, and that's our job, is to marshal those guys.
We're discussing the minutes.
Yes.
I know our lawyer left, but.
Is anything else on that, or is there a motion to approve item 7, April 19th minutes, item 8, May 10th?
That's corrected.
Special meeting minutes, yeah, okay, item 7 as corrected. Item 9, May warrants for $207,722.26. Item 10, April 2018 financial statements. Item 11, approval of assessment district distribution number 10-17/18.
Second.
No, I said, is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, so moved
Matthew
by-
moved, Jim seconded.
No, actually, since Jim was trying to second it, we'll give him the motion.
Yeah, okay.
Whatever.
Seconded by Matthew, okay. No discussion. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions, the motion carries 5-0. Item 12, committee reports. Have you been to some?
Yeah.
What was that, CSDA chapter?
CSDA, yeah, so, you know, try to make it, you know, it was a pretty good meeting in terms of a lot of interesting things to kind of report on. I know we're running late. So the May 1st meeting was at San Mateo Mosquito Vector Control. That's gonna be the new meeting place tentatively. So the previous meeting, we didn't have enough for a quorum, so we couldn't even do anything really. This meeting, we did have enough. They really just need people to step up. I said I would help out, so they elected me secretary, really just helping out and try to get the numbers up. The one thing to report on would be we had to get a new insurance policy to cover CSDA. The reason why everyone was fine with that is because if we could get every agency that's part of CSDA, the managers, to sign a little addendum that says that we basically have insurance in place, then we could get rid of that separate insurance policy, which is $500 a year. So, you know, I'm gonna try to take the lead on that and get it's just literally a signature from a manager, but it's harder obviously than it sounds to get it from all the different agencies. So
The feeling last time I was there where this was discussed was that every agency has the insurance, they just have to sign off.
That's all it's a matter of. That's why I'm hoping we can get this done before the next payments for the insurance renew. So that, because that's $500 a year, but the budget's only like $1,200. So already they're talking about raising the dues to $50 a year, which is really nothing. But, you know, even in terms of talking about that for the first time ever almost, they're talking about budget issues.
How many member agencies do you have to contact?
I think 21, somewhere around there. But,
you'll earn that $500.
Yeah, I know. It seems so easy when we decide, but then I don't think one agency has done it since then. So that's where Josh was like, okay, you know, you kind of take the lead on that.
So who was the guest speaker?
So the guest speaker was, it was Anthony Tannehill from California Special District Association Legislative Representative You know, really a lot of interesting things in terms of what's going on in the pipeline. You kind of start out by saying, number one thing just that's going on across the board is kind of all the you know, surrounding basically sexual harassment and all that, and, you know, just from the state level, what's all the things in the pipeline and all that. So we talked about that a little bit, and then talk about all the issues around the redevelopment agencies. That's, you know, whether it's tied to the fair housing and everything else like that. The one bill with that is AB 1778. You know, basically, you know, they're saying that they're opposing it.
1778?
Yeah. You know, one of the big redevelopment agency measures. You know, basically they're supportive of it, and, you know, under grounds that it gets amended, you know, in a lot of different areas.
Should we have an agenda item taking a position on it?
You know, possibly, except that it just seemed like this one was a little bit in the air in terms of this was one of the big things that's coming in the pipeline. That a lot more, you know, even their stance was that they want to be behind it, but a lot of things need to change. So it seems like a lot of things need to be worked out. Whereas the other one, I think definitely there's more direct interest, is AB 2258. So this is saying CSD is opposed unless amended. So this is one of those interesting ones. You know, on the surface, it's that it provides grant funding for LAFCO to complete important studies that aren't being done because LAFCO doesn't have the money to do it. The interesting part why they're opposing it is that anything LAFCO chooses to study with those funds automatically changes from 10% of the community objections to 25. So that makes it basically the bar is much, you know, is going to be much higher to.
That's a good thing.
If you support what LAFCO's studying, you know, if you exactly, that's kind of where that was my comment. If you like what LAFCO's studying and you're behind it, that's a great thing because it means it can be executed.
Okay, I retract my comment.
Yeah, if you're not in support of what LAFCO's studying with those funds, then that means all of a sudden from a 10%, which is, you know, manageable, it automatically jumps up to 25%, which is the same standard that, you know, us as boards have. So it's basically giving them that power to make anything that they study with those funds is basically, they're saying, hey, this needs to happen, and the bar to prevent this from happening is gonna be more difficult. So, you know, like my own personal views, I think it's kind of, that comes out of that. Do you support what they're doing? You know, in some cases you're gonna be for it, in other cases you're kind of against it, depending on the specifics of it. Another one kind of for us is, he said AB 1999, which is public entities providing broadband in rural communities. And so it's just, you know, I need to look more into it, but it's interesting because just being, you know, our community where it's at, this could benefit us a lot.
We actually could get authority to provide broadband internet. The only caveat is that we cannot use eminent domain to take the existing system. We'd have to build out a new system ourselves. But a CSD is allowed to do that, but there's the special line in the CSD law, or not in the CSD law, I forget where, maybe it is the CSD law that says you can't use eminent domain to take an existing communications system.
Yeah.
Because the worst company in the country has the most money to use to buy elected officials.
And then the last one is Assembly Bill 3037. And they're basically saying that unless it's amended to ensure local agencies that are not willfully contributing their property tax increment to redevelopment, housing, and infrastructure authority are made whole for the revenue diversion away from critical local services and infrastructure. So that was their stance on why they're opposing that right now.
Well, I think we should just blanket oppose redevelopment agencies because between their inappropriate use of eminent domain and they're stealing money from every other government agency, it's one of the things that Brown got right. So, thanks for the report.
Quick report on communications committee.
Yes?
The only issue that we wanted to sort of bring was mentioned was the insurance issue. 5 of the proposed activities in the summer, our current insurance agency says are considered dangerous, and they would have to have a vote of their board, I believe, to cover us for them.
Yes.
So,
The
Delia.
CSRMA?
Yes, yes, I guess. Delia is looking into changing insurance or whether we can get inexpensive riders. I mean, we're talking about 2 mountain biking events, the medicinal plants event, because somebody could learn how to learn about a medicinal plant and then take it home and eat it and, I guess, get sick. Gentle yoga is considered dangerous.
Oh, sure.
And I forget what the other one is.
Huh?
But,
But Jen-
the resolution we had was that, and I didn't come up with it, some of the others did, I thought it was a good solution, was to require registration for each of those, so that we have information, and if we have to cancel them, we can let the people know that they've been canceled. Meanwhile, that gives us quite a while to find an insurance alternative.
And maybe in the meantime, I mean, part of that was the idea that could we look into the special event insurance, you know, it'd probably be
Yeah,
a couple $100, just insure those 5 events. And then if that doesn't fall into, you know, if we don't switch insurance companies altogether, just buy that special.
Well, CSRMA is not an insurance company, it's a collective.
Yeah.
And so I think we would have to think long and hard about abandoning CSRMA, but, you know, maybe we can get the other necessary insurance separately from.
So staff's gonna look at that, but to some extent, we just thought this was something the board should be aware of, because it is an issue. And it will be bad public relations if we have to cancel all those things. So we are taking a little bit of a chance, but we felt that was half of the offerings, and it seemed that we felt that there was a good enough chance that adequate insurance could be obtained, that it was, you know, with that fallback, that it was a good thing to move forward with.
So the cost of that extra insurance would easily be within the general manager's approval.
Yes.
So we don't, that
Right.
doesn't have to come back to the
But just
board.
wanted you to be aware of this, because
Yeah.
it's a little bit of
Yeah.
a tricky situation.
Well, it's good to be aware of that, thanks. Anything else? Moving on, item 13, no attorney's report, item 14, general manager's report,
Nothing further?
item 15, administrative staff report, item 16, engineer's report. Oh, I forgot to read that, is there anything in here?
No?
Item 17, future agenda items.
I wanted to ask if we could put an item on, something on future agenda items for follow-up items, for things that we just get an update on that we had asked about, and then, you know, I keep asking about what the RCD is gonna do, you know, if they're going to go ahead and do the non-native removal. Just some, you know, if we could add some things to kind of a follow-up list to get a brief report on.
In particular, I'd like to know.
For instance? I didn't hear.
The RCD contract and whether they are going to come and do the non-native
okay.
removals, that's an example of one thing that I'd asked about several times, and just,
Okay.
if it was on sort of a little list of things we were following up on, there was something that, Leonard mentioned that he'd been following up on. So, is that possible?
And the ball's in RCD square on that. But I understand.
sounds
I
like-
have an action items listed in one of my districts where we just say, here's what we did, and then the next meeting we show, you know, the board asked me to do something. Here's
Yeah, I
what
mean,
did.
we're not talking about a lot of things,
No, I
but
get
just,
it.
there's a few things that,
Right.
you know, it'd be nice
Okay.
to be able to have just a quick status report,
All right.
without a whole agenda item.
Even if it's just in the packet.
Well, I could put it under general manager report.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
I would just say I heard you kind of make a comment, but I think the parks only meetings in terms of, I think how much ground we have to cover and, you know, how much it throws us off some of the other things where.
Yeah, this is crazy.
Yeah.
Either that or a time limit on meetings.
Right. And especially some, you know, like I think Barbara said, that kind of turned into something maybe it wasn't supposed to be, but it is what it is, so.
It is what it became.
Yeah.
Okay, we're at the end of the agenda, so we're adjourned.
Thank you, Steve.